the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Very much appreciate you joining me. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for your company. Lots and lots to talk about today. And if you're going to pop out, or you missed any of the show yesterday, want to catch up, don't forget you can always take a look at my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Really easy to find. Hit subscribe and then you will never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, President Emmanuel Macron is arriving in London today for a 3-day state visit. One would have done. It's expected that the French president will face scrutiny over his failure to crack down on illegal migrant channel crossings, given that we've paid the best part of £750 million of British taxpayers' money for him to do that. But there's an awful lot of talk about this one-in, one-out returns deal Keir Starmer is urging. Macron apparently would be keen to sign it. So basically, anyone who arrives on those channel migrant boats, we get to return to France. But in return, we have to take someone that France has already kind of approved for asylum, who want asylum in our country. Now, would that be a good deal for us? And would it be a good deal for France and indeed the rest of Europe? Because the European Commission is already trying to kibosh that, pointing out that actually what will France do with the people we return other than try to send them back to Greece, Italy and elsewhere, and then they'll have to deal with the problem. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, in particular on that topic. What do you make of this one-in, one-out deal? Such that we know about it, if it even happens. I mean, anything they suggest, it either won't happen, it'll happen and it'll be dreadful. I think it would be a fair summary, judging from the last few years. But what is your reaction? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about Donald Trump. He's ramping up his global trade war to punish Russia and its allies in the BRIC countries as Putin continues to bombard Ukraine with missiles. Meanwhile, during his 3-day state visit to the White House, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu surprised Donald Trump by revealing he'd nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Oh, his invitation to the King, Nobel Peace Prize nomination. Here's a thought. Here's something to call in and message in on. What would you give Donald Trump to butter him up to get what you want? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I'll put that question to my guest joining me today. Tom Slater, as always, on a Tuesday, editor of Spiked Online, joins us for the whole show. Morning to you.
Morning.
What would you give... What would you have? Either Emmanuel Macron or President Trump, because it turns out we are just buttering up foreign leaders. State visit here, stay in the King's bed. You know, you can go to bed with Camilla. I'm sure they'd offer anything. To be fair, Camilla, for Macron, about the right age group.
No, exactly.
Let's be honest.
As we can see. No, the mind boggles. I'm trying to think of something for even because both of them basically like to be treated like princelings. One's just slightly.
I'm going for gilt, for both men.
Yeah.
Gilt-edged, proper, full gold, Trump Palace style gold or Elysee Palace style gold, full-length mirror.
Oh,
it's what they like the most.
No, exactly.
Both
just leave
men
them
like
alone
that the most.
with their favourite company, which is themselves.
Absolutely. Although it have to be a bit of a taller one for Donald Trump. Just a tiny little mirror for Emmanuel Macron.
For Emmanuel, yeah.
Anyway, that continues the sizest element of the show. French president on a state visit to the UK. First question. Why the hell are we inviting Emmanuel Macron to this country? What has Emmanuel Macron ever done for us? I mean, he was leading the punishment beating of Britain over... was it a democratic vote for Brexit? I believe it was. He's done everything he can to try and punish us. Threatened to cut the electricity off the Channel Islands over a fishing row. Doesn't do anything to stop the Channel migrant boats. At every possible opportunity has tried to humiliate and scupper every policy that we have tried. What on earth are we doing? Rolling out the red carpet for that little man who, by the way, is going to be out of office in 2 years and he's extraordinarily unpopular with his own people. Why?
Oh, it's very unseemly, isn't it? This is purely because Keir Starmer has got it into his head that if he can butter up Emmanuel Macron, the migrant boat crisis will go away.
He's had a year.
It hasn't worked a year before. The Tories in the previous government throwing money at Macron's government didn't make the blindest bit of difference. And I guess the hope is that by appealing to the quite kind of princeling, kingly elements of Emmanuel Macron, loves a state visit, loves a red carpet, loves a gilt mirror, whatever size it might be, that this might help get some sort of deal over the line. But I come back to that point you just made there. He's a lame duck president. Yeah. He is being outflanked both to his right and his left in French politics, both sides of which will probably not like what migrant deal he comes to.
Maybe that's why Starmer likes him. Because weirdly, Keir Starmer has got that massive majority, which Macron thought he was going to get with his last election and failed to get, and actually, lost his majority in the French Parliament. But maybe that's what they've got in common, because actually neither of them has any authority or popularity at home.
Exactly. Pro-EU, useless, very unpopular. Weird, wild speculation about their personal life. So
I think this is going to be interesting, actually, because you never see them in the same room at the same time. There is a possibility, although the same person. But this is the thing. I mean, they're just. Macron, I think, is good on foreign policy. I think he's been solid on foreign policy. I'll take him on that largely, not the whole way. But yeah, so we're rolling out the red carpet. What do you make of this? Well, demands on the front page of the Mail today. We've had back our 771 million quid. I mean, more than £750 million that we have given to the French to try and stop these boats. Now, there was a point where they were stopping more boats, but then they just started building bigger boats and putting 50 people on them instead of 30. So you had slightly fewer boats, but more people arriving. We've seen that massive increase in the number of boats. Already 20,000, is well over that now, probably about 23,000 by now, by the end of last week. And we haven't even hit the real, summer season of crossings, the July, August, September months, when they come en masse. He's not done much. They're not even, they slashed one dinghy, but they won't do that regularly. They're putting some drag nets down, all of that. Is doing a deal on returns the only way we're going to deal with this, as in you have to stop the demand? So if people know they're going to go pay, £1.5, £3,000, whatever it is this week to get to the White Cliffs of Dover, that you are just going to be put on a plane or a boat and sent straight back to France. As we understand it, as such as we know the details, this idea of this deal would be for every one migrant who arrives on the Channel dinghies, we can send them back, but we will then take someone who is trying to seek asylum in France who wants to come to Britain, and a lot of them will be queuing up saying, better deal in Britain, you get handed out goodness knows what, as we know, and we will take one of those asylum seekers in return. But as Mike Graham just pointed out, I mean, you could argue, in my view, well, those people claiming asylum and perhaps be already approved for asylum might be a better bet than the young men of military age turning up on our shores illegally. But they're also, these people who are claiming asylum are likely to be bringing a whole load of dependents, aren't they? No,
absolutely. I don't think this plan is going to happen for all kinds of different reasons. There's already the EU who are kicking up a stink about this. They really don't like the idea of Britain having any kind of backdoor arrangement with any European country. You deal with all of us, or you deal with none of us, is the way they approach these things. There's also to the point at which it's politically saleable to the public. I know we don't know a lot of the details so far, but kind of one in, one out will just sound like moving the problem around. I take the point about the fact that the people we will be taking from France would have passed some kind of process, but that's putting a hell of a lot of faith in France's internal refugee screening processes. We've seen how
presumably be us screening them as well. I mean,
but it would still be something where you're kind of having to rely on another country, which in some cases might have a friendly administration, in other cases might not. And the fundamental problem with all of this, with the crossings from France to the UK, is that France have always had an incentive to allow those crossings to continue to take place because of the fact that they're no longer their problem. Could we see a similar thing with this scheme where, shall we say, there's a willingness to kind of just usher them in the other direction?
I've always thought it's completely against French interest to allow people to leave and come back, because one of the reasons why people are making their way to France when it's actually a very unfriendly, unwelcoming place to what are intents purposes economic migrants, is that actually because they're coming to Britain, if they know they're not going to be able to get to Britain, they probably wouldn't come to France, where it's less hospitable than some of the other countries they could be in. But I mean, I'm all for everything worth a try, but I know for a fact that if Keir Starmer is overseeing this deal, it will be a bad deal for Britain. And if the EU agrees to this deal, it will be a good deal for the EU. We've already had the European Commission speaking up on behalf of Spain and Greece and Italy and other countries saying, so when these people are sent back from Britain to France, where is France going to send them? Because France doesn't want them, isn't going to look after them. They're going to end up back in our countries. Their first, we'll go back to those, the old rules. Basically, it's first safe place you can seek asylum. That's where you have to stay. And understandably, those southern Mediterranean countries are going, don't think so. Don't really want them either. The whole thing is madness. The whole thing is utter madness. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And do you want your money back? £771 million that hasn't really done anything to solve the problem. I still come back to the fact that Keir Starmer's criticism of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss briefly, and Rishi Sunak was, if only they would just sit down and have proper talks and stop all the refusal to have proper conversations. Even when, Priti Patel was Home Secretary, she wasn't invited to one of the big sort of sit-downs on the migrant issues. They chose not to invite her in France. That tells you something. The problem was on their side. But his view is always, you can just sit down and talk and you can come to a deal. Yeah, it's not working out that well, is it? Funny how these things turn out to be a little bit more complicated than he thought.
No, they really just thought that because they were slightly similar politically and because they were competent people who weren't preoccupied with culture wars and all these cliches they told themselves, that it would all
trans
be
women and women, no
weekend.
culture wars.
But it was like when Donald Trump said he was going to come in and sort all these problems in 24 hours. They actually made it sound as if all of this was incredibly straightforward.
Yeah.
This stuff is difficult, and it's made even more difficult when you refuse to actually take serious decisions to deal with this problem. Yeah,
exactly. And also when you're basically, as we've seen with Keir Starmer throughout this, from 2016 onwards, you're on the side of the opposition. That's the reality. And when the King today at the state banquet for Emmanuel Macron at Windsor is going to say, we had some of his words released front page of some of the papers, going to be talking about how we have no borders, no borders between us, and talked about our shared effort to solve complex threats. We do have a border with France. We're different countries with different interests. Can we stop this nonsense?
No, absolutely, and that's come to the fore since we've left the European Union. And that's whoever is governing this country needs to get to grips with the fact that there is such a thing called the national interest. Sometimes you would hope that you can, through diplomacy, it will align, but there's sometimes where you have to clash, where you have to have out your problems. You want to be neighbourly, but at the same time, you can't just put up with whatever is being pushed your way because of the fact that you want to make nice with the European Union.
Exactly.
So at some point, our governing class needs to get over that. We have left the EU. We have certain policies that your voters want to pursue, and you have to pursue them even if it makes you unpopular in a Brussels dinner party.
But it's interesting that Emmanuel Macron is going to be at the state banquet. He's going to be meeting with Kimi Badenoch, the Tory leader, Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader. Obviously, we're meeting with Keir Starmer. 2 days bilaterals after all the state and the red carpet and the gold carriages stuff. But he's not going to be meeting with Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, which is really interesting because actually, you think, well, he's only Politico, the morning email say, he's only got 4 MPs now. It was 5, but now 4. But the reality is, Keir Starmer's policies are more being dictated by Nigel Farage, in the same way that a lot of what Macron is doing is now being dictated by Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, who won the last parliamentary elections. This is the reality, is that actually these two men, they think they're so high and mighty and above the populist leaders. Yeah, it's the populist leaders who are driving everything now. There we are. Let's talk about a populist. Norman Tebbit, Lord Tebbit, he has died at the age of 94. Obviously, a lot of people might know more from, the spitting image puppet. This is Bruiser Biker. He was absolutely right-hand man to Margaret Thatcher in every sense. He was also obviously a high-profile victim of the IRA bombing of Brighton in 1984, and his wife sadly was paralysed the rest of her life in that bombing. He also famous for that phrase, talking about how, party conversation, his father didn't riot when he didn't have a job. He said he got on his bike and he looked for work. He was I'm older than you, so he's more a part of my adult life, but he was an incredibly sort of dominant figure throughout an awful lot of my time, certainly in the 80s, in my time, being aware of politics, just an incredibly dominant figure, and who had incredible influence on the Thatcher government and therefore on the country. No,
absolutely. Certainly one of the Thatcher loyalists for many of those years, serving many different positions in cabinet, and someone who I think became one of the kind of key and sort of seminal figures of that government. He didn't necessarily rise to the high offices of state, but nevertheless was seen very much
made the cabinet again and again.
But nevertheless very much seen as a kind of central figure. He never quite made that job in the Home Office, but still was someone who was seen as kind of carrying the message. And you can understand why, insofar as whatever you think of the Thatcher government, what you think of Norman Tebbit. It clearly
I imagine you weren't a fan.
Well, I wasn't around, but, looking at these things, it's interesting what a seminal figure and an interesting figure in the kind of in a chapter of the history of working class Toryism as well, nicknamed the chink for skinhead, coming from kind of working class outer London, and very much with those successive wins, very much kind of won off the back of the kind of southern white van man to a certain extent. You're really seeing that shift in politics, where there was a lot of working class voters who were kind of bristling against what felt like the limits of Labour Party and trade union politics, the closed shop.
Exactly. He was crucial in that. Yeah, in the trade unions. Well, those powers all being rolled back. I remember saying, he was anyone who'd lived through the winter of 78, 79. I remember it very vividly. School being closed, rubbish in the streets. We'll kind of Thanks, Norman. But an incredible, real giant. When there were giants in politics, there don't seem to be so many anymore. I want to get back to British politics very soon, but I also want to talk about Donald Trump. He's got Netanyahu on a state visit, the Israeli Prime Minister currently. Netanyahu surprised Donald Trump with a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. Lots of talk about he's trying to bring peace in the Middle East, Ukraine. And again, for me, it depends on what terms. But I was absolutely stunned by people saying, this is outrageous. President Obama was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He won the election in 2008, got into office in 2009. Only 11 days after his inauguration did the nominations close for the Peace Prize in 2009. And yet he was nominated and won the Peace Prize. He was nominated when he'd literally done nothing. Literally nothing. And yet so many people were saying, how wonderful this was that he had been nominated. He was nominated, apparently, the Norwegian Nobel Committee cited his efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples, particularly his work towards a world free of nuclear weapons. Well, that worked out well, didn't it? Netanyahu and Trump have done more to rid the world of nuclear weapons in recent months.
You're starting to get the impression that when it comes to the Nobel Peace Prize, people are just thinking it is almost indistinguishable from the Oscars or something.
Didn't Greta partly win one at some point?
Wouldn't surprise me. It's just like it's done on the basis of vibes. Even if Trump manages to, through his slightly unconventional or brash tactics, actually bring some modicum of peace either to Eastern Europe or to the Middle East, almost people wouldn't accept it because he didn't do it in the kind of glossy, warm feeling kind of way that they would associate with this kind of stuff. So it would be, it's a great move by Netanyahu, not least because he's in the process of trying to butter up Donald Trump in the same way we're trying to butter up Emmanuel Macron at this point. It's one of those things where they wouldn't give it to him even if he did pull off the impossible in terms of these two conflicts. I think we all know why.
Yeah, indeed. I also just want to run by you. There's a new report from the Office for Budget Responsibility. We know they're the ones who oversee fiscal finances. They've been talking about where are particularly the welfare bill and public sector debt and all of this. They are basically forecasting that we're going to be in a lot of trouble. They're trying to say it in a very subtle way, but basically we are in an awful lot of trouble. They're saying UK's public finances are in a relatively vulnerable position with limited recent success in putting them on a more sustainable footing. Tell us something we don't know on that front. The triple lock is currently treble what it was initially assumed to cost, this sort of triple lock for pensions, when it was introduced back in 2012, so more than £15 billion a year. The state pension is on course to cost 7.5% of the UK's entire GDP within 50 years. In the 1950s, it was just 2%. That's a huge. Basically, debt is on track to hit 270%, so almost 4 times GDP, like the country's output by 2070, and the abandoning of planned spending reductions on welfare and things like that has substantially eroded the UK's capacity to respond to shocks. We are facing one hell of a budget this autumn in terms of tax rising and spending cuts. But there's no evidence whatsoever that this government, either Rachel Reeves in her tears or Keir Starmer in his total and utter failure to understanding of this stuff, is willing to take the bull by the horns and say we're going to have to cut a load of key spending. You can't. Cutting MPs' expenses isn't going to make a difference, guys. It's a drop in the ocean. We're talking about many tens of billions going on welfare. They're just not willing to do it because the backbenchers won't let them. They're not willing to be unpopular, but they're not willing to do the stuff that's necessary. This problem, by the way, also created by the Tories, obviously. Let's not pretend it hasn't been. But but we are in a whole heap of trouble.
No, absolutely. I mean, listening to those quotes from the OBR, they sound a bit more anodyne than they actually are. I mean, this is just the red warning lights flashing very...
This is whoop, this is that red, that's September the 7th, 3 o'clock. This is the whoop, whoop, whoop.
And of course,
the economy is up the spout.
The OBR very rarely get the predictions right. But you look at anywhere across the board at the moment, any kind of report, all the indicators suggesting... I mean, we could genuinely be on the verge of a serious sovereign debt crisis if a few things don't go our way. We've seen how fragile the economy is. We've seen how jittery the markets are, not just in relation to the whole Liz Truss blow up a few years ago, but also, gilt yields have been, soaring recently. And
more higher than they were under Liz Truss.
And we're already paying, about 100 billion a year just servicing the debts that we already have. I mean, this
not paying off the mortgage.
Exactly.
We're just paying
it's just
interest
going on. It's just disappearing. And you think at some point you're going to have a government that is willing to engage in the kind of proper structural reforms that would get us over
and
get
the
us out
public
of this.
Voters are going to have to begin to understand. I've been saying this for years. We get the governments we deserve, and if we insist on making them lie to us, saying you can have this, you can have that, or free school meals, free this, free that, welfare here, state pension protected, benefits for everybody, brilliant, let's defend the country. If you want that, that's great, but you're going to have to pay for it, and a few billionaires over there aren't going to have enough money to pay for it all. Simple as that.
You can understand the exhaustion because of the fact that after 2008 we had the government coming in, the original coalition, and then the Tory party, who were saying, there is going to be some bitter medicine, but there will be brighter days ahead. We ended up with a decade of, lost economic growth, effectively. So people are bristling more at the idea that they're going to have to put up with this. But it's also about politicians who are willing to make a longer-term argument, put out a vision to say there are things that we're going to have to do, which will be disruptive, which might hurt in the short term.
We need the Argentinian president.
But this is where we're aiming for. I think voters are grown up enough to listen to that kind of message. There's just politicians refusing.
He's slashed inflation, his growth is off the scale. He's basically said, we're going to have to massively cut spending. Everyone assumed, he'll get in, but then people will bristle. No, supremely popular because he's doing what he said he was going to do, and everyone knew it was necessary. We need a melee. Is Nigel Farage on melee? I'd love to know your thoughts. But also I want to hear from you about Keir Starmer. He's hoping to agree this one-in, one-out Channel migrant deal with President Emmanuel Macron, his state visit. He's arriving today. He's got a speech in Parliament at 4 o'clock, state banquet at Windsor Castle tonight. I'd love to know, should he be having a state visit? What do you think about that? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll get your calls up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up, we're going to be talking to James Ball, political editor of The New World. They were The New European, but now they're going further afield. Certainly Emmanuel Macron is coming further afield. He's travelling over the Channel. Was it La Manche they call it? The English Channel, to come for a state visit. I don't know why we're rolling out the red carpet for Emmanuel Macron. I asked, what of the French? What has a French president ever done for us? I won't say just the French, because I do like my fizz. Do like my fizz and my cheese. And do love an eclair. So actually, there's lots of things we do like about the French. Great holiday destination. However, what has Emmanuel Macron done for us? Why on earth are we rolling the red carpet out for him? And what do you make of this idea of this one-in, one-out channel migrant deal? That we send back anyone who arrives on those channel dinghies, but we have to take someone who's seeking asylum already sort of approved in France, whether it's our officials who do it or French officials. Is that the answer? Will it just mean we'd end up with a hell of a lot more people and more incentive for people to come over? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's get some of your texts and tweets. Sonia says Starmer is a weak appeaser and Macron knows it. Totally. James says, how about 0 in and all illegals out? Gina says, all out and take Starmer with you and the rest of Labour. Margaret says, what is the point? We're taking a migrant quota by default, which is responsibility of the EU, caused by their open borders. Exactly. Not the UK's responsibility, legalising economic migrants and making them impossible to deport. Stephen says, so we will still have 60,000 a year, just 60,000 different ones, as it's supposed to be people with family ties. Will the family have to first agree to accommodate them? If so, it has at least some good issues. And Keith says, let's all do the hokey-cokey. This would be a completely pointless exercise, except for Starmer, who would claim it as some sort of victory. Of course he would. Well, let's go to the phone lines. Robert is in Hertfordshire, wants to have his say. A very good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning, Julia. I agree with one of your messages. 10,000 out and none in. Look, we shouldn't be negotiating. We should be dictating. We are not in the EU. We are an island, and we should be setting the precedent. It's as simple as that.
Hello, where have you gone? I think we've got right, so we lost you for a second. When you say we should be dictating, how do we do that? If they won't accept the people back, unless we genuinely just take a boat, go to their shores, and on the beaches we just literally offload them into the water and then we leave again, what are we going to do?
No, what we do, we have a floating prison. We change the laws. Anybody who tries to claim asylum by entering the country illegally, straight away, that's it. They can't do it.
So wait a minute. So we need. Would this be backdated? We need floating prisons to accommodate 120,000 people. Is it roughly?
Well, we've got two problems. We've got the problem that's happening right now as we're speaking on the beaches of, and we're worried about the other ones that are already here in a minute. Yeah. Let's stop them. Let's
stop the next lot. Yeah.
As for swapping. One in and one out. All you're doing is changing the dirty water in the bucket.
The argument. I think the argument is it wouldn't be these sort of unidentified young men of fighting age who paid an illegal smuggler. Although of course the people who've got to France have already paid smugglers, haven't they? But they're in France and then they're going to apply for asylum and then they'll be assessed on the basis of need and family links or whatever. But I think the worry there is they will then be bringing in their families.
Well, what we need to do, as for state visits, we need to invite heads of state who already operate a zero tolerance to illegal migrants. They're the ones we need to be friends with, and they're the ones we need to be influenced by. Not the French. The French. I can't see why we're appeasing them.
No,
I really can't.
I don't know what I just literally don't know why we're rolling out the red carpet for a lame duck president who's going to be out of office in a couple of years.
Well, you know why. Starmer's trying to get back in the back door. We can't. The most depressing thing about it is, and I'm a member of Reform, and the most depressing thing about it is Nigel Farage is not going to be able to do anything. I'll tell you that now. Until we get out of the ECHR, nobody is we need people accuse us of being right wing. I'll tell you what, let's show them right wing.
Let's do it properly. Well, but the thing is, genuinely, I don't even think getting out of the ECHR is going to do it, Robert. Honestly, because we need to sack basically half the judges. There's asylum tribunals who let people stay because they're a paedophile and they'll miss their kids. That's the maddest we're in. Robert, great call. Thank you so much. Let me go to Kerry, who's on the line in Devon. Hello, Kerry.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well. What do you want to say, my darling? Hello.
Way back.
Oh, sorry, your line. Sorry, Kerry. Start again because we dropped the line.
Yeah, basically, we could bring out genetic testing as far as somebody's concerned if they are an illegal immigrant. and they say they've got family and they've got genetic ties, then why are we not genetically testing them to ensure that they are definitely genetically related to the person that they're saying that...
Isn't that tackling the wrong end of the problem? I don't care whether they've got family ties in Leicester or Durham. I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. Unless it's like their kid,
Yeah, well, I completely agree. At the moment, I'm supporting a learner who's got muscular dystrophy. Now, his dad's been brought over from Lebanon on a work visa, and basically his son, who I'm teaching, is, he's an absolutely fantastic student. Obviously, he's getting the care and support he needs over here where he didn't get that over at Lebanon. But they brought his dad over here specifically so that he could work, and obviously he brought his family with him. So at the end of the day, there are some reasons why I do believe that certain migrants should be allowed to stay in this country.
Right.
But on that...
I'm sort of wondering why, as much as one wants to be a good person, why the kid from Lebanon has to be having treatment in England.
He's not, though. That's the thing. He's not actually entitled to anything till he's 18. He's got to wait in this country 2 years before he actually gets anything. So his dad is literally living off the wage and supporting the family off the wage.
No. Why is the lad being flown to England for treatment for muscular dystrophy?
He's not. He's getting no treatment at all. The only thing he's got is a wheelchair over here, and that's it. He's just getting tuition because he's going to be going to college in September. So at the end of the day, his dad was brought over here. His dad was, he's obviously a highly qualified nurse, and he's brought his family over here, and he's working 5 days, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week to support his family.
Well, yeah, as you should do. His dad, that's what dad should do.
I
literally their job.
So I do believe that there are some,
there are some cases. I'm wondering, given all that, that brotherhood in the Middle East, why Jordan didn't step in, or Saudis, or I don't know. I'm querying that as well. But don't mean to sound harsh, but don't think we need to be taking in the world's people who can't get medical... I mean, I understand the hospitals in Beirut are actually very good, but there we are. Kerry, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much indeed. 10:35 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to James Bill from the New World magazine. Why are we inviting Emmanuel Macron over to this country for a state visit and rolling out the carpet? And what does he reckon on this one in, one out migrant deal? And we'll be talking about whether or not Donald Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. Obama did. And what did he do? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. 10:37 is the time. Tom Slate is still with me. Get his thoughts on what my next guest has to say. James Ball is political editor of The New World, no longer The New European. They are branching out. Very, very good morning to you, James.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Should we be rolling the red carpet out for Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who has basically done everything he can to try and scupper Brexit, to punish, not the British government, British people for a democratic vote back in 2016 and again in 2019 to get Brexit done? Has done nothing to help us on any of those fronts and is a lame duck president with less than 2 years in office. Should we be rolling the red carpet out to him and giving him state banquets and dinner with the king?
I mean, as much as we should be rolling out the red carpet for anyone, we do it because we think we'll get some advantage out of it. So let's see if we get some advantage out of it. But if we can hold our nose and do it for Donald Trump, I think we can probably hold our nose and do it for Emmanuel Macron, can we not?
But for you, the thing is, Keir Starmer and you would not be holding your nose for Emmanuel Macron because, he's one of us, isn't he? He's so pro-EU, he's favour of every single international global organisation. You agree with him on everything. But isn't the interesting thing that Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, both extraordinarily unpopular and unsuccessful leaders in their own countries, is that what they've got in common?
I mean, I think Emmanuel Macron's an amoral sellout. I think he's tried to appease the far right, and he's got to reap the reward for that because it's only made them more popular. I think.
How did he try and appease the far right?
I think he's shown how those sort of tactics fail.
How did he try and appease the far right?
Some of his rhetoric on the Muslim population in his country, some of the rhetoric on immigration, etc., backed up with ineffective action. I think he's sort of shown the difficulties of establishment politicians trying to talk like populists and then act in reality. I'm no fan of Emmanuel Macron, but
maybe he'd be more
the cost
popular.
of doing business is to invite people you don't like or that you don't.
But maybe both men would be more popular with their populations, their far right voting populations, if they didn't just talk the talk and they actually walked the walk and did something about it.
Well, I think it's a lot easier to talk the talk than walk the walk.
Yes, but you're saying they're trying to appease the far right.
As well.
But obviously they're not, because apparently the far right, which has the views of actually the majority of the population of both countries and indeed most of Europe, which is they don't think we should have open borders and have unlimited arrivals from the third world. I mean, this is not actually it may be something that you absolutely love at the New World. You think no borders whatsoever. Come on in, let's share Britain's wealth and our lives with everyone who wants to come here, regardless of their values or links to this country. That's not what most people think. I hate to tell you, James.
It's absolutely not far right to want closed borders. It's absolutely not far right to be worried about immigration. I think all sorts of people worry about that for all sorts of good reasons. I think what is far right, and I think what too many mainstream politicians play into, is people who suggest there's some kind of sinister planned Muslim takeover, there's plans to change population, there's problems with particular ethnic groups.
There are problems with particular groups.
There's problems within every ethnic group. I'm not saying there are no issues there.
No, there are very specific criminal problems and cultural problems with some specific religious and ethnic groups that you don't have with others.
And
the fact that you don't even acknowledge that is part of the problem.
That's not an argument to say we won't let people in from certain countries or who are from certain faiths. It's not. We look at people as individuals. We look at people on a case-by-case basis. Is that not the principles of liberalism?
Yes, and yet constantly I'm told we need to talk about the, quote, Muslim community or the gay community, the trans community. The left talk about communities and not individuals all the time.
Well, I'm a liberal, and I'm saying I want to talk about individuals.
Yes,
so
I think we should very much not allow people from third world alien cultures who don't share our values to the country. Yes, I think that's a pretty sensible policy, which most people would agree with.
I mean, if I only let people that shared my values, you'd probably be on the first or second boat out, Julia, and that would be very sad.
Well, I mean, again, what values do you share? I mean, I'm talking about values like belief in, freedom of speech. Well, yeah, maybe you don't share that one. I don't know. Personal liberty, equality between men and women, gays and straights, people's right to, to basic freedom, choose their religion, to leave a religion, join a religion, marry who they want. Those are pretty basic values, I would suggest.
I mean, they're
not values shared by some communities in this country.
Well, who's talking about communities now? I mean, look, there's lots of people who don't share all of those values. I mean, part of liberalism, the curse of liberalism is that we allow it.
Anyway.
liberalism extends to allowing Emmanuel Macron in, and if we have to pay for his dinner, we have to pay for his dinner. I don't
mind paying for his dinner if we get something in return, but we've already paid £771 million. That's a very expensive canapé. That's all I can say. We paid all that money to try and get the French gendarmes to actually do something about the huge number of people who are arriving in France and who are setting off from Calais to come to Britain. Now, we've not seen any particular success there. You know, they stop a few boats, so they build bigger boats and they put 50 people on instead of 30. We've seen a massive increase in the number of people coming to our country. Now, you've got pull factors, you've got push factors, but there's talk about this one-in, one-out deal that Keir Starmer hopes to agree this week. We know that the other European Union countries are not very happy about it because they're wondering, well, if you send migrants back to France, are they going to be sent from France back to Italy or Greece or Spain? And we don't want them either. But what do you think of the one-in, one-out deal? Do you think that would work? Do you think that would be something that would do Britain good?
I mean, look, I can see why everyone looks at it and scratches their heads. I mean, what it does sound like, you look at it and say, what's the point? What's the point of taking one in if you just kicking someone out if you get one in? But France has to think there's something in it for them. Europe has to think there's something in it for them, because otherwise it's quite good for their migration if they're worried about their own politics to just go, yeah, sure, get on to England. We won't stop you. You can sort of see why we have to make something in it for them. Someone explained this one to me and basically said the idea is that someone crosses, a lot of the people who cross the border are economic migrants.
No.
They're not actual refugees.
No.
They're not chasing persecution.
James, you far-right racist, you.
I will say things that are true. And the idea is that people who cross like that will be swapped for people who are much more legitimate asylum seekers who have had their stories back-checked, who've
also paid people smugglers to get to France.
But essentially, the idea there is that, firstly, it gives you a reason to make small crossings not work for economic migrants. They get turfed out quickly. They don't get to England. It stops them crossing. And if you get a legitimate person and they're processed fast, they can work after they're processed. So we're not paying for them. We're not paying for their housing. We're not paying for them to go.
We'll be paying for their housing. Look, they'll be on low incomes.
No one says it's perfect. The logic is it's a bit better.
Wouldn't it?
Cheaper,
it is.
it processes faster.
It may well be a bit better on paper. I can see that argument. However, in practice, given how bad Keir Starmer is at making deals, he'll probably be. Do you know what? He'll probably end up paying Mauritius £9 billion in return for the deal of the one-in, one-out migrants from France, because he's that bad a deal maker. He'll probably give away his firstborn child to Emmanuel Macron. Probably give away his wife, for goodness sake. Might be too young for Macron. I don't know. But genuinely, the chances of Keir Starmer doing a good deal when every deal he's done so far, whatever it is, whether it's train drivers, pay, you name it, this man is no good at making good deals for this country.
We've got an okay trade deal with the US. You know, where we are with tariffs is a bit better than other places. I don't love it. Mauritius, it is what it is. I don't think we can say, you know, politicians have to try something, we need something, and then shoot down anything before it's tried. Well, let's give it a go. Let's see if it works. Let's see if we can get the deal, because as you say, a lot of the rest of the EU doesn't like it.
Okay.
And the fact that they're sort of going, hang on, this could be a problem for us, suggests that they think there might be some deal that works for the UK in it.
Well, although the main thing for them is that they don't want them leaving France. They'd rather they were in Britain rather than sent back to Italy. Just finally, very briefly, President Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, on a state visit to America in the White House, he surprised, we're told, Donald Trump, who's blushing like a little bride. It was like a Southern belle when he discovered that Netanyahu has nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Think that's a fair nomination?
I mean, it tells you how little a nomination makes. Any Pol Sci academic, any MP, anyone could nominate for it. I think Julian Assange has been nominated most years. But if you've got a friendly academic, if Matt Goodwin was still at a university, he could nominate you.
He is at a university.
But yeah, get somebody you like, and you can rival Donald Trump for the nomination.
I'm going to insist that I get a nomination. Did you make the same complaints about how worthless it was when in 2009 Obama was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and later won it, even though the nominations closed within 11 days of his inauguration, so he hadn't done a single thing?
I mean, I went on to do quite a lot of journalism about how he led to a lot of drone deaths and then massive civilian deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan.
So he shouldn't have got it either.
So he absolutely shouldn't have got it, no.
All right,
well, there's quite a lot of war criminals who've had that particular prize, so maybe Trump should get it.
James Bull, come on again. It's always fun. Critical editor of The New World. Thank you for that. That cough there from Tom Slater saying, bring me in. Come back in on whatever you want to come back in on.
Well, it's a reminder, isn't it? Basically the grubby business of politics. And it's something that people like to pretend they're above when they're outside of government. So you saw this with Keir Starmer. So many of his cabinet members willing to kind of posture against, particularly Donald Trump. Obviously,
David
much more friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, you were hard pressed to find any member of the front bench who hadn't blithely compared him to a KKK leader at some particular point. But you get in, and you've got to deal with the realities of it, and that's one of the things where, even though it's quite unseemly sometimes, and I think probably Starmer could have gone away about it with the Americans, which wasn't quite as toadying, picking up his papers and so on, handing him the handwritten invite to the state visit. It's just the nature of doing
handwriting, great handwriting.
So again,
realpolitik, you have to do
and
it.
politicians, drop in the moralising as soon as they get into the door number 10.
Maybe just don't do it in the first place, and then you won't find yourself in that situation. 10:48 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts. Lots of calls coming in about Emmanuel Macron, that one in, one out channel migrant policy as well. Why are we rolling out the carpet? Up next, we're going to be talking to a former commander of the US Army in Europe. That's Ben Hodges, to find out what he makes of all of this. His talk.
Scheme needs to be scrapped. I'm sorry, it is so rotten to the core that the whole thing needs to be completely dismantled, and we can perhaps start again with a scheme for a very, very, very small number of the most needy, because that's what a civilized society does. And I'm talking a tiny fraction of the current claimants. It is a complete and utter scandal, this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:51 is the time. Let's turn our attention to where we are with Donald Trump and, how he's dealing with Russia, and indeed how he's dealing with Israel. President Netanyahu is there in the White House on a state visit. retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges joins us now. He's the former commander of the US Army in Europe. A very, very good morning to you.
Hey, Julia, thanks for giving me another chance.
Always great to have you on the show and get your expertise and interest. Let's talk first of all about President Netanyahu. He's at the White House yesterday to surprise the president, who got all coy with a revelation. He'd written a letter to the Nobel Peace Prize Committee saying he'd nominated Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. Does he deserve one?
First of all, I doubt it was a surprise. And I've never liked the idea of somebody seeking an award. And President Trump has made it very clear that he really wants the Nobel Peace Prize. I would never have presented an award to any officer of mine in combat that I thought was actively seeking that award. And so it's just really inappropriate. But I would still say it's premature, way too early for something like this.
Wait a minute, it's not as early as Obama. 11 days into his first term in office, he was nominated.
And that was premature also.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be it's a fair criticism to make. And so I would also say that was way premature. So whether or not he deserves it, I think it's premature for me to say that.
Yeah, well, indeed. Well, I mean, let's talk about where we are in the Middle East, because he's basically dealing with two particular issues at the moment. Well, current issues in the Middle East with Israel and Gaza and Iran, obviously, but also dealing with Ukraine, which we'll come to, and obviously at some point dealing with China and Taiwan, as many are expecting. But he said that he thinks that talks to end the war in Gaza have been going along very well. He's talked about he thinks that we could have a deal within the week. He said that Israel wants to end the war, Hamas want to end the war. The reality of this is, though, that they want to end the war on different terms. Israel wants to end the war with no Hamas, and Hamas wants to end the war with no Israel having any occupying status whatsoever in Gaza, which, of course, is untenable to the Israeli government, given what happened on October the 7th. So are you hopeful that we will see any peace? And do you think that part of that is going to be these sort of internment camps, which have been suggested by the Israeli Defense Minister?
Well, there's a reason that there's been war in this area for so long, is because the desires on all the different sides are so different from each other. My problem is that the Netanyahu government, the way that they have used force in such a terrible way against the innocent people that are in Gaza, separate people from Hamas, they should burn in hell forever. But the innocent people that are caught up in this, have paid a huge price at the
But Israelis say they're not attacking the civilians. Hamas put the civilians as their human shield. Do Israel just simply not take on Hamas then because Hamas do that?
Well, Julia, British soldiers and American soldiers could never use force against a village where the Taliban was located indiscriminately, because we would know that there were civilian Afghans.
I thought we did.
Also there.
I thought we did repeatly.
Absolutely not legally. I'm not saying it never happened, but we were not permitted, nor should we do it. Great Britain would not want its soldiers killing innocent people as a matter of policy. And I think the Israeli approach has been much more liberal use of firepower in areas where they know there are civilians. And of course, Hamas knows that, just like the Taliban would hide inside, and Al-Qaeda would hide inside mosques, because they know that we don't use force or weapons against
But it's Hamas committing the war crime by using the human shield. I mean, what is Israel supposed to do? We just leave Hamas there, carry on as you were? We'll just wait for the next October the 7th? What are their choices?
Come on, you could do better than that.
No, I don't. What are their choices?
Of course, Hamas is committing war crime, and that's why I said all of them should burn in hell forever. But the burden on protecting the civilians, innocent people that are caught up in this, is always on the military.
But then an internment, a camp where you vet everybody, right, you're fine, right, we'll take you in, you're fine. I mean, that would keep civilians safe, but we're told that would also be a war crime.
Well, I think I'm a little uneasy even talking about this, because it looks like we're starting to do that in the United States now also, as as the Trump administration builds up internment camps in America. Yeah,
okay. Well, then people are in the country illegally.
Well,
if I arrive in America and I'm illegal immigrant, I would expect to be sent home. And if I don't agree to go home, I'm going to have to be interned before I get sent. I don't, in theory, in principle, have an issue with this.
The problem is that a lot of people that are being swept up by the ICE are here legally, and ICE is out to get numbers. So the indiscriminate grabbing of people off the street, that's my problem.
There certainly needs to be a very, very, very clear sort of appeal process and going through absolutely the proper channels, don't we? Let's talk about Russia, because we've seen the tariff pause that has ended for countries like South Korea and Japan. We've also seen Donald Trump saying he wants to use tariffs to punish Russia and allies of Russia, the BRIC countries in particular. He's got a fresh wave of levies that are coming on what he calls the anti-American group of BRIC nations, including Russia, facing extra tariffs of 10%. Is that going to make any difference to anything?
Well, honestly, there's a reason that people have given him the nickname of Taco, that he always chickens out, because he backs away. Even I guess yesterday, they extended the deadline on tariffs again. The problem is that he's so inconsistent and he changes so quickly that it's difficult for governments and nations to actually plan, and as well as American businesses to plan on what are they really going to do. And for the president, for him, he treats all this as if he's negotiating over a townhouse in Manhattan, instead of something that affects millions of people's lives. And so this is not a good way for the United States to protect its strategic interests when it seems to be so helter-skelter on how he does it.
And haphazard. And indeed, again, even the tariffs on the UK, well, we don't have a big trade deficit with the US, but also one would expect a big trade deficit if you're a very, very, very wealthy country with a lot of people who can afford to buy stuff from around the world. Of course, you're going to have a trade deficit with a lot of those countries. There is an argument, though, certainly I've always felt this dealing with Russia. A lot of, they've got these all these sanctions on Russia, but they can't sell to the West. Oh, well, they'll just sell to India, and then we'll buy them back from India. Or they go to Kazakhstan, we buy them back from Kazakhstan. We should not be allowing that to happen, and we should be punishing the countries that have picked the wrong side. This is good and evil. Pick the right side.
Yeah, well said. The best tool that we have against Russia is economic leverage to shut down their ability to export oil and gas that they're selling to India and China. If we did that, this war would come to a screeching halt, what they're doing against Ukraine. But we don't do that, and there's too many holes in all of our different sanctions protocols. But use tariffs as part of an overall strategy, not as some game to inflict pain on other countries.
Yeah, and indeed on everyone, indeed. Really good to get your thoughts. Covered a lot of ground there, very brief. I hope you'll come on again very soon. Lieutenant General retired Ben Hodges, he's the former commander of the US Army in Europe. I'm going to get Tom Slater to come back on this, but we'll do that in the next half hour, so you've got a little bit more time. But Tom Slater is going to be joining me for the rest of the show. Coming up, we are going to be talking about, the new definition of Islamophobia. We're also going to be talking about the state of our prisons, which are basically full of people who are completely and utterly addicted to drugs. But how was that allowed to happen? Oh, yeah, and the Epstien Files. There's nothing in them, nothing to see. Is that right? This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, as you already know. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or in your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is lovely to have your company. Also to have the wonderful company of editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Morning to you once again. I'm going to rip through what we're talking about because I want to get straight to you because there's so much we want to talk about today. Emmanuel Macron arriving in London. He's got a 3-day state visit. I'm asking why on earth we're rolling out the red carpet to this man, given that we've seen no help at all on Channel Migrant crossings. There's talk about demanding the £771 million that we've already paid the French to totally fail to stop those channel crossings, to actually demand that money back. But also, there's a lot of talk about this one-in, one-out migrant policy. We'll talk more about that coming up. I also want to talk about Labour's plan to introduce an official definition of Islamophobia, which would, according to a new report by the think tank Policy Exchange, hand a significant new weapon to a Muslim group which aims to influence media reporting of religion, i.e. basically stopping our freedom of speech. They've warned that the organisation, which is part of the Muslim Council of Britain, which the government has already agreed they will not be dealing with, should not be engaged with or taken at face value by journalists, regulators or anyone else. So why are we creating this definition, which would mean that I can't say things like, don't think the burqa's a good idea. We'll talk about that. Plus, why are criminals in Britain's jails spending their sentences getting high and watching daytime telly? Hi, prisoners. Feel free to carry on watching. The Prisoners Watchdog has warned in a damning report by His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, that it costs £57,000 a year to keep someone locked up, and many are sitting in their cells for up to 22 hours a day, high on drugs, watching telly. We'll talk about that. Do get in touch. I want to hear your thoughts on Keir Starmer inviting Emmanuel Macron over for a state visit. Why are we inviting this president? And what are we going to do about the channel migrant deal that it could happen? We'll see if it happens. One in, one out is the idea. We'll talk in more detail about that. But I want to know your reaction. Lots of calls already coming in. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one standard network rate message. Let's get to you, Tom. We'll talk about Macron first, but I do want to get your thoughts on what Ben Hodges, retired former US commander of forces in Europe, had to say about Donald Trump and Gaza and Ukraine. But when it comes to this invite, I mean, is it just realpolitik that we have to invite over people, whether we think they're going to be useful or not? And a bit of buttering up Emmanuel Macron might work when it comes to a little bit more cooperation with the EU. He's a very significant figure in the EU, a little more cooperation on channel migrants. But should we be offering that? Here you go, you get the state visit, and then hoping, oh, pretty please at the end of it, please, Macron, can we have a deal on migrants? And is the one in, one out deal that we know that Starmer's looking at, so any migrant who arrives on a channel migrant boat on a dinghy gets shipped back to France, but then we have to take someone who's been vetted for asylum as a legitimate claimant. We're told we're going to take them to the UK. Is that the answer?
I mean, it seems like there's two sides to this. On the one hand, of course, there are various points in which a government has to invite someone, give them all the trimmings, give them the state visit. There are even more sinister authoritarians than Emmanuel Macron who've enjoyed those benefits over the years, you know, from more far-flung countries.
Chinese presidents, for goodness sake.
Quite. So it's one of those things where, of course, we all know that this is part of the grubby business of politics. Yeah. But then it's also about what are you trying to get out of this? And, you know, on the level of will this work, it's not obvious to me. This is a French administration which has had so much money, hundreds of millions of pounds thrown at it, which has had several governments now trying to negotiate with it. And what have we got in return? We've got continuing record numbers of boat crossings, plus we've got periodically Macron threatening to cut off the power to the Channel Islands over a dispute, Brexit-related fishing dispute. You've had constant kind of posturing, constant punishment, essentially, for Brexit and for us daring to leave the European Union. There's a certain point in which just a question of national self-respect has to kick in.
You'd think. Well, we know that Keir Starmer doesn't have that because he was among those leading delegations when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn, leading delegations to Europe, to Paris, you know, and Brussels, to basically try and undermine the deal that was trying to be done during Theresa May's time. I mean, absolutely scandalous. I would say traitorous behaviour.
And all of this would make a bit more sense if we thought it was going to work. Do we really think that one more heave and the French are finally going to sort this problem out for us? Also, he's a lame duck president. He is on his way out. He's also going to be replaced either by a party very much to his left or figures very much to his right who are in different ways not going to like whatever migration deal he may or may not come to with the British. It just seems to me, like often with Keir Starmer, expending so much political capital, self-respect,
and the nation's self-respect.
Absolutely, for Nout.
Yeah, I'm thinking Friedrich Merz, the new German Chancellor, looks like a better bet. Okay, leading a coalition government. Yeah, but I mean, Macron's got no power. You say he's at the end of his second term, 2 years to go, less than 2 years to go for that. But this is, I mean, at least Friedrich Merz is talking the talk. They're actually dealing with the defence side of things. They are finally getting their grips on immigration. They've managed to close their borders. They've cut their immigrant arrivals, the asylum seeker arrival by 40%, virtually overnight. Maybe he might be worth handing a state visit to, rolling out the red carpet, a nice dinner party at a state banquet at Windsor Castle. We've got the King saying that, there are no borders between our countries. I mean, yes, there are. And there's also a very, very, very large channel, which we'd like people to stop allowing people to get on dinghies to come to us. In terms of the one in, one out policy, now, it does seem, on the face of it, to be utterly. I've got a little fly running around. Hello, it's very hello, little fly coming to see me. Very disconcerting. But the idea is, okay, so someone pays a people smuggler. They get on a boat. They get here. Sorry, it's now landed on me. It's like I'm being inundated. There are no flies on her. Yes, there are. Don't know why it's so discombobulating. Being attacked by animals while you're talking. So someone pays a people smuggler. They get here, and then we're stuck with them for years and years and years. They're going to end up staying. We're paying a fortune for them. The idea is they get shipped back to France, and France agrees to accept them. But in return, we have to take someone who is in France claiming asylum, and someone who says, "Well, actually, I'd like to come to Britain because my second cousin by my in-laws lives in Leicester, which is the territory we're going to be in." And then we take that person. Now, you could argue that there's no difference in numbers. There's an argument that it could be lower in numbers because once the Channel migrants realise there's no point coming because you're going to come straight back, that there's no point them going, in which case the numbers would go down. But there's also an argument that, especially if Keir Starmer's negotiating it, because he's a terrible negotiator, that people who are coming who are supposedly legitimate asylum seekers will actually be saying, "Oh, and I'm bringing my cousin and my mum and my grandparents and my 15 brothers and my 12 kids," and you end up with more people than you're getting otherwise. But I mean, what's the choice? I
mean, it seems like a bit of a mess. I think in this area, because of the fact that Keir Starmer and various politicians throughout Europe of that kind of centre-left hue, because they don't really want to do what's probably necessary to get this issue
because they're
dealt
kind and nice.
Absolutely, they don't want to go near don't want to touch or reform anything that's got the word human rights on it. Because of this, they're stuck with trying to come up with these kind of too clever by half wheezes, because they think that if you just kind of tinker with the policy, if you set up all these quite complicated arrangements with other countries, then it will start to sort itself out. It's clear that the problem is such that that's not really going to work.
Everyone is going to have to work together there. But look, France don't want these people.
And working together is absolutely what you need to do, but what does working together look like? Working together could mean making sure you sign returns agreements with countries where you've got a lot of people coming from, as we did with Albania, which severely reduced the numbers of people who were coming in small boats as a consequence of that. It could also mean coming to some sort of arrangement about making sure that when people are crossing from one territory, which is where they should be claiming asylum, into another, that maybe there is some agreement there. But it's just quite clear that any attempt to come up with a kind of convoluted way out of this isn't going to work. And also, I think entangling yourself...
Always too clever by half.
And entangling yourself with the EU is always going to be a problem, because
that's what he wants to do. He wants to tie us in.
Which is demented because of the fact that the EU has been riven by the migration question for so long. They could never agree on the question of moving the, apportioning the issue around. They're in dispute.
They're fining, Hungary and countries. But you've got to this idea.
The
this
fact
idea
that you look at that and think, we should get involved in that is insane.
They're already. We've already got Greece and Italy and Spain and other countries and going saying, wait a minute, you send them back to France. Where are they going to end up? Is France going to send them back to us? We don't want them. No one wants them. We need them not to be in Europe at all. That's it. And again, if Europe became less hospitable to these people. They wouldn't, easy to get into and easy to stay. They wouldn't be there. That's the reality. I just want to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Talking of the red carpet being rolled out, we were talking earlier about Donald Trump rolling out the red carpet for President Netanyahu, from Prime Minister Netanyahu, from Israel. He said he's nominated the President of the United States for a Nobel Peace Prize, which we've discussed. The interesting conversation we just had with a retired American Lieutenant General Ben Hodges about Donald Trump and whether he should get the Peace Prize. In terms of what is going on in Gaza right now, there's talk about there could be a peace deal, that that Donald Trump says the talks are going well, Hamas want peace, Israel want peace, but there's talk about this internment camp. What do you, for Gazans, some 600,000 could be vetted and put in this internment camp but not allowed to leave until people agree to voluntary, is it gun to the head, voluntary, basically moving to another country, emigration to another country. I don't know who wants those people. I mean, certainly Egypt says, no, thank you. I know a lot of left-wing Labour people seem to think we should take them all here. Really great idea that is, guys. What do you make of the chances of peace? It's really hard to tell at this point. It's also hard to tell what proposals that we're coming to hear about are part of that negotiation, as in they're part of signalling and trying to focus minds and all the rest of it. I mean, any kind of peace which involves Hamas continuing to exist seems to me like a bit of a misnomer. I think you can't. The idea that these are just one side in a war, a kind of border conflict, a land conflict, it fundamentally misunderstands what an organisation like Hamas is. I mean, it's an apocalyptic, genocidal cult. It's not really that interested in the question of a Palestinian state. It's interested. Doesn't care about Palestinian people in an Islamic caliphate. I mean, it's one of those things where I think people constantly try to put an old script onto the newer developments in that part of the world, and therefore missing the bigger picture. They think it's the IRA. It's not the IRA. No, absolutely, and so as ever with this, the question is what does the detail actually come down to? Will it actually hold? Of course, there was so much noise about the ceasefire, which was agreed to many months ago now, but it was pretty clear that was going to unravel as well. So it's hard to talk about clear-cut proposals in too serious a way, just because of the fact that this might all collapse very quickly, or at least be agreed upon, something which holds for a while and then falls apart again when fighting resumes. And at the end of the day, Israel refused to leave Gaza while Hamas is still there because they're waiting for another October the 7th. Hamas leadership, they change every day because they're constantly being killed, but that they would carry out an October the 7th every single day if they could. We wouldn't put up with it. No country in the world would put up with it. Would be expected to put up with it. It would not be the case. And Hamas want Israel out of Gaza, and they cannot leave Gaza knowing they're there. Just to let you know, if you're watching, you'll be already seeing this at RAF at Northolt. The French President Emmanuel Macron is due to arrive. He's going to be greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales at RAF North. So I don't know yet. We don't know if Brigitte is coming as well. Let's see if we can try and find out. I haven't heard any mention of it, but I assume she is. Might get to see another little scrap. State visit. Well. Yeah. I mean, actually, that's the problem. There's a bit of delay. Lots of other people are getting off the plane, but I'm wondering if they're just busy having a punch-up. Brigitte is coming in. They're busy having a full-on, mixed martial art fight in economy class, waiting to get off. I mean, it's like a Ryanair jet to Malaga. It's not a fair fight. Macron should be able to have someone help him, just in case. But I mean, it's not a fair fight, is it? I mean, we shouldn't joke. It's called domestic abuse. I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, genuinely, at the time, I remember saying everyone's laughing about it, but I mean, goodness knows what's happening. But we'll let you know when the French president has set foot on that little carpet, that red carpet. We are rolling out for the man who basically tried to punish you and me and everyone else of the 17.2 million people who voted for Brexit. He wanted to punish us for our democratic vote. I'm sorry. There was a reason why I asked that question during the Labour leadership contest between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, and I asked that question, Emmanuel Macron, friend or foe? And it became something of a diplomatic incident when the French president was actually asked about this, and Rishi Sunak replied, of course, and Liz Truss went, oh, well, I think, the jury's out, we'll decide. And everyone thought this was absolutely outrageous. It was a very fair answer, given his behaviour, but there we are. Yes, it was me that asked that question. Anyway, peace in the Middle East, peace in the Channel. We're going to get peace everywhere. Donald Trump's going to win a peace prize, apparently. Are we going to get peace in the House of Commons? We've got the number 10 and the Treasury both pointedly refusing to rule out a wealth tax being imposed in this country. This is after Lord Kinnock suggested at the Sunday's morning round that they should be looking at a wealth tax. People worth 10 million or more, so very few of those people, 10 million or more, 2% tax, so 200 grand. I'm assuming a year. Well, you know, we're going to have a million less in 5 years. Let's do the math. Except you won't. You'll have millions less immediately because those people will ship out and go abroad. At the same time, we've got this welfare situation, government failing to deal with adult disability benefits. Lots of talk about whether or not they tackle the special needs situation that's costing 12 billion quid. And we've just had a report this morning from the Office of Budget Responsibility saying that the UK's public finances are in a relatively vulnerable position. They are being very, very careful with their words. But one of the particular things they pointed out is that the triple lock for pensions is costing treble what it was initially assumed to cost when it was introduced in 2012. They assumed it would be costing around 5 billion a year to have that minimum increase of a certain amount or a certain percentage or inflation or median wages going up. Instead, it's 15.5 billion pounds. Our debt is on track to hit 270% of GDP by 2070. Basically, it doesn't matter whether we fiddle around the edges on this or that. We are looking at spending billions and billions more pounds on welfare for children, working age adults and pensioners, but we have not got the tax receipts coming in, and you can tax all the multi-millionaires you want that are still left in the country. That's not going to cover the costs of that. We're going to have to borrow more. As we borrow more, the costs of borrowing more go up. Our costs of borrowing are already higher than Italy's. That tells you something. We are in a whole heap of financial trouble, and we are about to find out just how bad in the autumn budget, are we not? No wonder Rachel Reeves was crying. We're all going to be crying on budget.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where you just wish we had a government that had the mettle to take this issue seriously. I mean, first, what Rachel Reeves was originally setting out to do was basically more tinkering, you know, making so much noise about this 10 billion headroom, which gets wiped out every time, you know, the American government passes wind, essentially. It's one of those things where you would just, it's such a tragedy that we've got all this going on, and now you've got a Labour Party which is in hock to its backbenchers who now just want to push and push for more spending without thinking about the rest of it. And the government have only got themselves to blame as well, because if you want to do things as controversial as reforming welfare benefits, you have to actually reform it. You can't just treat it as a cost-cutting exercise.
And you have to make the moral case, which they don't.
Which I think people would be open for. I mean, it was one of those things where as soon as, you know, you start to look into this issue for about 5 minutes, you see that what we're presiding over is not a good-hearted pot of money put aside for the most vulnerable. It's become a trap for millions of people. So getting people out of that, making sure people can move back into productive employment, making sure the economy grows, because if you've got a growing economy, a lot of these questions about spending start to take care of themselves. That is a pretty simple message that one could sell to the electorate. They refuse to do that, and now they are incapable of making any decisions.
I think people should remember, actually, the David Cameron and the George Osborne government in 2010 were elected basically saying we're going to deal with the problems of the economy after the economic crash. Simpler, happier times. We had austerity for a lot of those years, certainly for the next 5 years, and then we saw that coalition government replaced by a majority government for the Conservatives. That tells you something, that actually, you know, more voters are grown-ups than you think in terms of understanding. Everyone says, oh, it was a terribly unpopular government. Well, apart from the fact it got re-elected, there's the giveaway. Look, 11:20 is the time. We are still waiting. I mean, that punch-up between the Macrons is still going on that plane at RAF Northolt, because they still haven't got off the plane. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, he's putting on his little Cuban heels. I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on. But we're still waiting for Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte Macron to arrive at RAF Northolt. They're sitting there on the plane. The door is open. Everyone's coming in and out. They're going to be greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Ben Habib about the new definition of Islamophobia and how we're going to be handing a tool to some very questionable organisations to beat us all over the head with it. And after that, we'll be taking your calls. This is Talk.
The whole scheme needs to be scrapped. I'm sorry, it is so rotten to the core that the whole thing needs to be completely dismantled, and we can perhaps start again with a scheme for a very, very, very small number of the most needy, because that's what a civilized society does. And I'm talking a tiny fraction of the current claimants. It is a complete and utter scandal, this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:23 is the time. Still waiting for Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte Macron to finish having their spat on the plane. We don't know. I don't know if that's happening, but it certainly was last time they got off a plane when the cameras were on them. But they're arriving for a red carpet being rolled out for them state visit. Speaking in Parliament later this afternoon, and of course the state banquet at Windsor Castle with the King and the Queen tonight. Just to give you some breaking news, junior doctors. This is going to come as a surprise to you. Their ballot result has been announced about whether to strike. And guess what? 90% of them say they are going to go out and support a strike by junior doctors. So that's going to wreak havoc on those waiting lists and people's ability to get treatment. We'll keep you posted on all of that. Right now, let's turn our attention to Labour's plan for a formal legal definition of Islamophobia. There's a warning from a new report from the think tank Policy Exchange that the new official definition would hand a significant new weapon to a Muslim group which aims to influence media reporting of the religion. Well, we'll talk about that right now with Ben Habib. He's a former Brexit Party MEP and he's leader of Advance UK, one of the 70,000 new parties on both the left and the right that have now appeared in recent years. Ben Habib, thank you for joining us. You're not going to team up with Zora Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn on their new party, no?
I suspect we're not politically, philosophically aligned.
I'm just wondering. You never know anymore. Look, first of all, let's talk about the idea of Islamophobia, okay? Because I mean, there's anti-Muslim hatred. And hating someone either for their religious belief, their ethnicity, that clearly unacceptable, clearly discrimination, clearly something that you and I and all of our audience would find wrong. Islamophobia, though, has become very. There's a word, it's a newly invented word, has basically been turned into, effectively, any criticism of Islam, the religion, the beliefs, clothing associated with, on any aspect of Islam, which means that you're into a very different territory, aren't you?
You are. I mean, the word itself means an irrational fear, doesn't it? Phobia is an irrational fear. So it's actually rubbishing in the first instance, anyone who may have legitimate criticism of the religion. And, we mustn't forget that at its heart, I think the biggest challenge that Islam faces right across the world, whether you're an Islamist, a fundamentalist, an extremist, or a moderate Muslim, one of the biggest challenges Islam faces is that the Quran is the word of God, as dictated to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel, and it is therefore perfect. And it is beyond improvement. It is beyond argument. And I think that's why so many Muslims seek to ban criticism of the Quran and Islam, in effect, because they see it as a criticism of God. And that makes the religion particularly challenging, as I say, for those Muslims who want to live in a democratic
Well,
society.
Indeed, exactly. Where criticism of, the royal family, the prime minister, any institution, any religion is part and parcel of our freedoms. Well, the government set up this anti-Muslim hate / Islamophobia definition working group back in March. Its final recommendations so far will not carry statutory power, but the Policy Exchange report, they have looked at the Centre for Media Monitoring. Now, they are part of the Muslim Council of Britain, and they are repeatedly, they say, trying to influence how the media is reporting events going on. So, for instance, they try to just criticise, talk to journalists and everything, and try to get them to downplay or ignore Islamist extremism, which is clearly the greatest terror threat, and we discussed that on the show yesterday. that they basically are trying to sort of get any criticism of anything to do with Islam sort of downplayed or deleted. And they say that this is having far too much influence, and journalists are giving into it, and no one should be having any dealings with these groups.
Well, absolutely right. This is the shutting down of free speech and the pursuit of a progressive discrimination-based ideology.
Yeah.
A protective blanket being put around an ideology as opposed to around an immutable characteristic. The argument often made is that it would be racist to be critical of Islam because essentially it's it's an underlying form of racism. But of course, there's nothing immutable about one set of beliefs. They can change over time. And so by very definition, it's an inappropriate it's an inappropriate term.
Well, indeed, but again, the idea again, the same with the unofficial, not really, but we do have it really blasphemy law. Only one religion is getting that protection, but it's absolutely fine to mock or criticise or slate any other religion. But it's interesting that the Policy Exchange say this organisation, part of the Muslim Council of Britain, should not be engaged with or taken at face value by journalists, regulators, or anyone else. And they say that they'll get a new weapon, effectively, if we have this definition of Islamophobia, which basically stops any tenet of Islam, of any aspect of religion being criticised. Now, I absolutely criticise blasphemy law, absolutely criticise some of the, certainly some of the dress. I don't even like the head covering, absolutely not the face covering, which I think should be banned in this country, as it's banned in many other so-called, liberal countries in Europe. It's quite the norm. It's not a requirement in most Islamic countries, so therefore clearly not a key part of it. But also some of the teachings, you have a right to beat your wife, to rape your wife. I mean, this is, things. No, I think we should call that out, but that doesn't make me Islamophobic.
No, absolutely not. And in trying to give this kind of protective characteristic to Muslims, effectively, they're shutting down free speech, and this is a further progression of our erosion of rights to freedom. And freedom of speech, as we all know, is the cornerstone of democracy. If we can't challenge these things and have an open debate without actually everyone getting, they're throwing their toys out of the pram, for want of a better expression, then we are damaging our democracy terribly. And there can be no better example than, for example, the Batley School, the grammar school teacher who showed caricatures. All he did was circulate other people who created caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. Then 3.5 years on, he's still in hiding. Yeah, and with his family. And
by the way, no charges brought against anybody who made death threats against him and his family, as far as I'm aware.
Absolutely. And you put that in contrast with the Dean of Trinity College, who 2.5 years ago described to his congregation that Jesus Christ, the statue of Jesus Christ in the arms of Mary in St. Peter's looked a bit transgender-like, and that the wound on his chest from one of those, from a Roman spear looked like a vagina. And there was absolutely no outcry whatsoever from the Christian community. I think the congregation were in tears, and perhaps rightly so. But this chap is not fearing for his life. In fact, he kept his job. He may have even, I would have perhaps advocated he be sacked.
No, but that's the key difference, isn't it? I mean, and this is the thing. And again, this widening, and again, it's perfectly reasonable to criticise any institution. We had recently with the case of the man who's been convicted of, causing public disorder by burning a Quran. I don't think someone burning a Bible outside the American embassy, for instance, he was outside the Turkish embassy, would be prosecuted for the same crime. No. Frank, it's your property. You can destroy it how you want. I must read a statement from the Centre for Media Monitoring, who've been criticised in this Policy Exchange report, saying this report is nothing but a politically motivated hit job, riddled with inaccuracies, distortions and smears. It comes from an organisation that has long sought to influence our media into negatively framing British Muslims. We're not surprised they're upset as we call them out. It goes on much longer, but I think that's a fair summary of their statement. But I mean, they would say that, wouldn't they, I suppose, is what they're saying about Policy Exchange, and we could say the same back to them.
Absolutely. And what we mustn't forget, Julia, is that this is an extension of the whole move in favour of progressive discrimination, which is born out of the Equalities Act, which is anything other than equal, which puts a protective blanket around minorities in the country. Yeah. And it is deeply, deeply damaging to the fabric of British society because it sets aside the interests of the majority. And we've got to go to the root of all of this. We've got to repeal the Equalities Act and all the regulations and other obligations that have now foisted themselves on the public in general. We've got to go back to a system where everyone is equal and open to equal criticism and challenge. And the other thing, sorry, just very briefly, the other thing that I think creates real problems in our regulatory and legislative framework is the Human Rights Act, because that was the foundation on which the Equalities Act was then built. Yeah. And, you know, we've taken immigrants in as if they're British citizens under the Human Rights Act, and then we've given them special protection and promotion and celebrated them to the detriment of the majority. And all of this needs to stop right across the board.
OK. Ben Habib, thank you for joining us. Former Brexit Party MEP, is now leader of Advance UK. Tom Slater, just wondering, have you started your own political party yet? Because everyone has. Everyone has.
It's the done thing, isn't it? So maybe I should consider it, because why not? At some point, everyone will have their own political party and they'll just vote for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. No. We'll have a coalition. Yeah, exactly. What do you make of it? I mean, the definition of Islamophobia, again, it just goes so much further than, you know, again, if someone is shouting at somebody or attacking someone or verbally threatening them or hurting someone because they are a Muslim, absolutely, I want that person prosecuted. It's an outrageous thing. But I mean, I walk past women in burqas all the time. I live in London. I don't go up to those women and say something or give them a dirty look or anything. I disapprove of it. I don't think it should be allowed in this country. I think it's an abomination. I'm not happy with it. That's where the law is. I would campaign to change the law rather than harass anybody in the street. But does that make me Islamophobic?
No, absolutely not. I mean, that's the whole point of having a free society, isn't it? Is that we can have out our differences and that we should trust that everyone is robust enough to have their views challenged. But for whatever reason, where British Muslims are concerned, there's this whole kind of industry, the supposed kind of anti-racist industry, which is saying that no, we should treat them differently, that they're not like British citizens like the rest of us, that they need to be force-fielded from criticism.
It's quite patronising, actually.
And it's kind of unique to this group to a certain extent. And it's but is
it ordinary people who are here who are Muslim? Is this what they're demanding, or is it just their leaders or the white sort of the hand class?
I think a lot of it is the hand rings. I think the problem is that what you've got is a perverse alliance between a small, quite conservative hardline faction within British Muslims and the kind of hand-wringing liberals making very similar arguments. But, in terms of this report and this Muslim Council of Britain Centre for Media Monitoring, I mean, it's worth pointing out the kind of things that they have been talking about as Islamophobia. I've had a few run-ins with them over the years. There was one report from a few years ago where they chastised the BBC because they did a report on an Iranian woman who was taking part in the anti-hijab protest, and they said that this gave a needlessly one-sided view of the hijab. There was another case in which they criticised a Joanna Lumley travel documentary because at one point she described one of the countries she was in as having a less strictly Islamic feel than other places that she had visited. So this is the kind of hyper-offence taking
and you know that often cases like the BBC and others will go, we'll be more careful, whereas you and I would go, do one.
No,
not
exactly.
Interested.
So let's not allow these kinds of ideas to restrict everyone's speech.
Absolutely. 11:35 is the time. Just to let you know, you'll really realise if you're watching us rather than listening to us, Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte have arrived. They got off the plane, obviously finished that fight. They didn't have a fight, but they leave a plane. They've been greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales at RAF Northolt. They've been meeting shaking hands and the military and various other great and the good, and they are off now in their car to Windsor Castle, where they'll be meeting the King and the Queen, and there'll be more ceremony, of course, that state banquet at Windsor Castle tonight, although in between he's going to be speaking to Parliament around 4 o'clock. Also, the breaking news in the last half hour: junior doctors have voted in a ballot from the British Medical Association, their union, to strike. 90% support for that strike. So we'll see what happens there and the impact that is going to be. I'll tell you something now, very clear. People will die as a result. That's what happens when there are fewer doctors on duty. That is what happens. People don't get treatment in timely fashion and people die. That's what they voted for. Do they have a right to do that? Legally they do. Should they? We'll love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll get your calls up next, coming in about Emmanuel Macron's visit and indeed that one-in, one-out migrant deal that Keir Starmer was hoping to deal with him over the next couple of days. That's coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. 11:38 is at the time. Do keep your calls that are coming in and your messages. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's get some of those coming in about Keir Starmer hoping to agree a one-in, one-out channel migrant deal with President Macron during his state visit to the UK. It's just begun. He and his wife Brigitte have just met with the Prince and Princess of Wales now in a car on the way to Windsor to meet the King and Queen. State banquet tonight. But I'm asking you your reaction to all that. I don't even know why we're rolling out the red carpet for him personally. But Norman says, what is the point in that? We don't want any of them. He's referring to the channel migrants, not necessarily the Macrons. Sick of this country being used as a dumping ground for people the French don't want. Mike says, what is the point of one in, one out? Sounds like an expensive way of completely not resolving the problem. Just told France not to let the boats come in the first place. Why did no one think of that? Danny says, one in, one out means no change, but Starmer will say he's stopped illegal immigration. He will. It'll be a technicality, won't it? And Nancy says, OK, but first remove the thousands that you've allowed in and then we start the one in, one out policy. I'm loving your work, Nancy. Let's go to Ben, who's in Lincolnshire and wants to have his say on this. Good morning to you, Ben.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Nice to have you on the show. What do you want to say?
Oh, this one in, one out policy. Starmer, he's not even on our planet, is he? He doesn't have a clue how the British public are feeling about this whatsoever.
No. He also thinks we're going to be fooled by anything that on paper looks good.
I don't understand how he thinks we're so stupid. But then in the same breath, he kept saying that the public didn't have a right to have a vote over Brexit and all the rest of it because we were too stupid to understand Brexit. So I suppose we shouldn't really be shocked by him in the slightest little bit.
No, he's one of those patronising sort of middle-class sort of lefties who just thinks, oh, let's let the technocrats, let us clever people run the country. You voters, you're a bit too stupid. He does think that, I swear to you. He thinks his backbenchers are stupid too.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I think we need to do is to go to a complete extreme now. I think our armed forces need to use force, military force, on our borders. We're an island nation. Very few countries on this globe allow people to invade them.
Yep.
So we need to use military force.
How do we do that? What are you talking about?
Warning shots, tow them back. If they refuse, then unfortunately do whatever's needed to do. And then if they actually make it to our shores, arrest them at gunpoint, put them behind barbed wire in a tented community for a few days, and then put them on military aircraft and fly them back to wherever they come from.
Right, so here's the thing. Sounds good. Sounds good to a lot of people. You tow them back, start towing them back, they jump in the water. You have to go and rescue them. That is maritime law and it's basic human morality. They jump in the water.
You hold them at gunpoint.
Yep.
March them into a tented compound.
Yep.
Put them on a military plane and fly them.
And what? Okay, so what if? Okay, you don't know where they're from, or they say they're from Afghanistan. They say, well, we won't take them back. What do you do then?
Just take them. Just take
them. You can't just fly into another country's airspace. They'll shoot you down. What do you do?
Land next door in Pakistan and ship them over.
Pakistan say, well, we don't want these people. They're not from Pakistan, but we won't take them. This is the thing. It sounds really simple, but how do you do it?
Well, once you start actually putting some proper force in, and once you actually start locking these people behind barbed wire,
they're less likely to come. I agree with you on that.
Don't give them army ration packs.
Yes.
Don't give them anything. Don't give them absolutely nothing apart from a tent, a blanket, and some warm food.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. We're going to have to go down that harsh route. But you know, the human rights lawyers will be all over that within 3 seconds. Of course, they will.
I couldn't care. Why should we pay worries about this? They don't care about our human rights. I honestly think that a huge portion, maybe not a huge portion, but a large number of these migrants that are coming here, we're allowing the snake into the nest. These are Muslim extremists that have fought in Syria. They fought for ISIS. They fought for Al Qaeda.
There will absolutely. We know from the security forces that there will be among those young men, and at the very least, even the ones who are economic migrants. They've already acted illegally. They've paid smugglers. They've come across. They're already criminals in that sense. And young men of fighting age from alien cultures. Again, I think the risks are clear, and we can see them on our streets every day. Apologies, I've got my cough here there, but Ben, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go to Alan, who is in Salford. Good morning to you, Alan.
Good morning, Julia.
Very good morning to you. You want to talk about Emmanuel Macron more specifically, don't you? What do you want to say?
I do. I think it's the biggest slap in the face that this Starmer has done to this country ever. He's always wanted to be involved with Europe. He wants to be a European Commissioner.
Oh, of course he does. It's a great little pension, that.
I'm afraid to say.
Yeah.
And as for when you see him clutching Macron, he's actually Macron's poodle. He's his dog. That's all he is.
Well, I just think the King and Queen and Camilla have just been meeting at Windsor Castle, sort of looking up because of I've got the camera's just above me, the TV screen's just above me, meeting Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte. They've got a guard of honour, we've got a military band. It's all red carpet is rolled out. You're saying that you agree with me, we shouldn't have rolled out the red carpet to him?
No way. You see, they've been sending hundreds of thousands of people across and watching them, waving them off to this country, and we're charging us £700 million.
Should we ask for the money back?
Ask for the money back. I'd send a lot of them back and get the money back as well.
I tell you what I'd love, if at the end of this meal, at the state banquet tonight, and all the great and the good are going to attend, apart from Nigel Farage, apparently Emmanuel Macron's not meeting him, but at the end of this meal, they present him with the bill for the state banquet, and it was 771 million quid.
Yes,
that would be priceless, wouldn't it?
But as for King Charles, I'm afraid, we had Queen Elizabeth I. She was the year of the golden age. The great Queen who's just died. I think it was the enlightened age for me. But now we've got the buffoon age. He's nothing but a woke fool, this king, I'm afraid. I think we should be republic.
Well, there we are then. Thank you very much, Alan. Appreciate that. 11:45 is the time. Just to get you up to date on that vote for doctors to go on strike. Resident doctors, as junior doctors are now called, because they're not junior, a lot of them are very senior. They have voted to take strike action over pay once again. Their union, the BMA, carried out a ballot. 55% turnout, and 90% of those who voted for strike action. They want a pay rise of 29.2%. I love the 0.2. I love adding in the 0.2. Just go for 30 and have done with it, lads. 29.2% in order to pay to be restored to 2010 levels. The BMA said this was a resounding majority. Strike action is not going to be called immediately, but if the Health Secretary Wes Streeting does not find, they say, a credible path to pay restoration, then they will go out on strike. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. We've had doctor strikes before. People died, no question at all. Doctors did get these doctors a very big pay rise, I think 22% over a couple of years. When Labour first came in, train drivers and junior doctors were first to get this money, far more than other healthcare workers and other public sector workers. There is no doubt at all they have seen their pay cut, depending on which inflation rate you use. They have seen their pay cut in real terms since 2010. But so have an awful lot of people who didn't get big pay rises when we had 11% inflation and went through austerity as well, when people were getting below inflation pay rises or no pay rises at all. That is the reality of most people's lives, I think, in recent years. Are doctors a special case, as in we have a shortage of them? They're very highly skilled, highly trained. We want to keep them in the NHS and in the country and not going off to New Zealand and Canada and everywhere. Do we need to pay them more?
I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, where there is a legitimate complaint, as you say, these real terms pay cuts, whether or not it's the consumer price index or the retail price index. There's a lot of arguments over to how much their claims are being inflated, but nevertheless, there's a legitimate complaint there. The thing about if you're taking this kind of action is that you need to bring the public with you if you're going to sustain it, if you're going to, basically win over hearts and minds. It's not obvious to me that they've read the room here very well at all. There's a lot of public support, generally speaking, for when nurses go out on strike, paramedics, people who...
Well, a lot of people think that nurses are paid a lot less than they actually are, which I find interesting.
And, part of that is public perception, as you say. But I think when it comes to junior now resident doctors who, aren't making incredible money straight out of medical school, but they will go clear in time. They will. A lot of them will make a fair wedge when they get further on in their careers. people are struggling to see this as something that they could support. So whilst, again, there's a legitimate complaint there, I think there's an inability to read the room, particularly because a lot of people have had real terms pay cuts over the past decade or more, and they haven't had the luxury of being able to do something like this.
Well indeed. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. More calls as well on Emmanuel Macron visits, state visit to the UK. Should we be rolling out the red carpet to him? And would you agree with this idea of a one-in, one-out channel migrant deal as well? Do get in touch. 11:48's time. Up next, going to talk about the state of Britain's prisons. Apparently, criminals are now just sitting in prison cells 22 hours a day, hooked on drugs and watching daytime telly. Is that really the answer to our crime problem? This is Talk.
That makes me so livid I could cry. That disgusting human being who happens to be the Mayor of London, who also happens to hold the title of the Police and Crime Commissioner as part of that role, that responsibility, obfuscating, gaslighting, bullying, belittling. These are little girls, underage minors, being raped by gangs in our capital city. You do not play games over this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to show. 11:51 is the time. By the way, we just had some footage, if you're watching on the TV, on the on YouTube or your connected device, of Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte meeting the King and Queen. That's actually archive footage. They haven't got to Windsor yet. I did think they must have had a very, very, very fast trip from the RAF Northolt, but there we are. They haven't quite got to Windsor Castle yet, so that if you recognise the older outfits, you're a better royal watcher than I am. Anyway, talking about people who will not be going out and about or making red carpet trips anywhere, let's talk about prisoners, because we've got a new report from His Majesty's Inspector of Prisons today, which has made it very, very clear that things are going horribly, horribly wrong in our prisons. His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, has issued a report saying that we're seeing an increase in violence against staff and against fellow inmates, and a lot of it is being fuelled by drugs and overcrowded conditions. We've got a lot of prisoners who are locked up for 22, 23 hours a day, often in cells that were meant for one. They're now for two. People, having a toilet in there, a bucket, or and having their meals in there. And they're also hooked on drugs and daytime TV. That means they are not going to classes, they're not being rehabilitated, they're not getting skills that could perhaps mean they go back on the straight and narrow when they get out. Well, let's talk about all of this now with David Shipley. He's a writer on prison and justice issues, and indeed is a former prisoner himself. A very good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, does this new report from the Prisons Watchdog tell us anything we didn't already know?
I think it does, actually. I think it's easy sometimes to just tune this stuff out because we're always hearing how bad prisons are and how many drugs there are and how much violence there is. But actually, this is the first report covering time since Labour came to office. It covers about 9 months of the Labour government, and things have got dramatically worse. So that's the key thing here. It was very bad already, but it's got a lot worse.
Why have they got worse in the last 9 months? Well, I mean, a new government doesn't make any difference to prison conditions, surely.
No, I think the issue is the system's been failing for a very long time because the leadership of the Ministry of Justice, the senior civil servants, are not fit for their jobs, and they are still in place. They're the sort of permanent administrative management and oversight of the prison system.
Isn't there also an issue? There is, I mean, it's just a huge issue in the whole of our criminal justice system and in prisons. Money does make a difference in terms of the ability to build more prisons. So they're building them now, but it's rather too late in the day, and there aren't going to be enough prison spaces. Pay for keeping and retaining and recruiting good quality, experienced prison officers, and the facilities we've got. Where lots of people might say, "Oh, we want people to have a horrible existence behind bars," but if they're just sitting there smoking skunk all day, for 22 hours a day, that they're not going to likely to be coming out as productive members of society, shall we say?
Well, yeah, I don't think we have a prison system that's tough at the moment. We have a prison system that's wasteful. It costs £50,000 per person per year to have them staring at daytime TV and having a high chance of coming out more addicted to more drugs and more likely to commit crime. That doesn't benefit anyone. Money, I know the cutting of money has been part of the cause of this problem. Overcrowding is part of the cause. But actually, even if you could flick a switch tomorrow and have enough capacity, enough staff, and enough money for activities, the system would still be bad because it has a morally corrupt culture, because it's been penetrated by organised crime in many jails, because there is corruption, certainly up to governor level. We've seen cases in the news in the last year or two. And the civil servants within the Ministry of Justice are not succeeding collectively. I think the Ministry of Justice is particularly insular in government departments. Almost all of the senior people have been in the department for decades. They all are, very well connected. They know each other. Often they have social lives together. They even live in the same areas. Their kids know each other. And it needs shaking up. Ministers really need to look at bringing in better people from other departments.
Well, I mean, exactly. We've seen a litany of failure, which was just talk to us. If you talk about organised crime and corruption, we had a story yesterday about Islamist extremists sort of teaching organised criminals how to make bombs and the like, and the organised criminals telling them how to get hold of weapons and how to launder money. And they're like, this is a bad sort of nexus. But we've also got, the amount of drugs coming into prisons. They're getting in through visitors. They're getting in through prison guards, often on very low pay and not particularly motivated, and you offer bribes and that, even using drones. I think a lot of people who have not been behind bars find it utterly bizarre that you can't stop drugs getting into a prison.
You can stop drugs getting into prison, but it requires universal searching of everyone coming in and out. It requires proper anti-drone measures, so nets, people to shoot them down, staff working nights to go and intercept. It requires secure windows that haven't got holes in them. It's very basic stuff, but there is a complete lack of will and capability. And sometimes I think you have to look at, if a prison simply isn't putting in place netting to block drones. This is not a complex technical project.
It's not expensive.
This should be similar to, at a certain level, incompetence becomes just indistinguishable from active corruption.
Is there actually an element of sort of, you know what, let's just have them all out of their heads on drugs. They're easier to deal with, which I think might have been the case if everyone was on cannabis. But the skunk, a lot of these drugs people are getting hold of are actually incredibly strong and can actually make prisoners quite violent. Is that why we're seeing this upgrade in violence, partly?
Well, you're absolutely right that prison staff can sometimes just accept drug taking because it keeps people quieter. I saw that myself as a prisoner at Wandsworth, and you see it in prison inspection reports. Staff will smell cannabis or spice being smoked and just leave it, because actually if someone is comatose in their cell, they're not a problem. The violence tends to come from drug debts which get incurred. Exactly the same when you get violence outside. So drugs cause violence because people are fighting over turf, because people are, wanting their debts paid, because people are trying to, maybe someone has incurred a debt and the way they pay it off is by being told to do some violence to someone else. You get all of this sort of stuff going on, which causes huge harm and can spill over into society. There are cases where people's parents, their mothers, have been sort of visited at home by by criminals saying, your son owes us £3,000, you've got to pay it, or we're going to kill him.
And of course, there is that literally a captive market in prisons, so you can sell at a higher price and get that money somehow. I mean, what is the answer? You were saying we need a shake-up of the staff, shake-up of some governors as well. Is it lack of political will? Because is there an element where, a lot of there's not that many votes in, giving more money to prisoners, whereas in fact we know a lot of countries that do actually spend more on prisons can actually rehabilitate better. You have fewer people committing crime, which would actually impact us in the long term.
Well, I think the step that needs to be taken is ministers need to recognise that the Ministry of Justice leadership is collectively not working. There needs to be a serious effort to grapple with corruption. So the counter-corruption unit, which was set up at the Ministry of Justice 6 years ago, every year gets about the same number of cases of potential corruption, but fewer and fewer get referred to the police, which is really ominous, I think. And actually what we need is groups like the National Crime Agency and the security services being tasked to really look at the links between organised crime and prisons, and recognise that in some cases that will mean that governors are connected to organised crime. They need to go after that.
You need to go right to the top. David Shipley, fascinated to talk to you, seeing it from both ends as a writer and researcher on prisons, but also former prisoner yourself. So appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Slater, editor at Spiked Online, your response to that?
No, just a reminder what a mess the prison system is in. I mean, people have known this for a while in terms of the overcrowding question because of having to let out actual violent criminals to make room for all the hate speakers a few months ago, but there was also, this is just something which, because it's out of sight, people don't pay attention to it, quite understandably, but at the same time, it's just creating more of the problem. If you've got people who are spending vast amounts of their time on drugs in their cells, these are not going to be people who are rehabilitated and come out the other end. So it's within everyone's interest.
Certainly not off drugs, certainly not getting literate or learning how to be a mechanic or anything. Anyway, madness. Coming up next, I'm going to talk to Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Hollinrake about Macron's visit and one-in, one-out channel migrant deal. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. It's 2 minutes past 12. Get it right there. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, very much appreciate your company. Thank you very much for joining us. Kevin Hollinrake is going to be joining us in just a couple of moments. Shadow Housing Secretary, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater, is with us already in the studio. I'm just going to bring you some breaking news before we get to what we're going to be talking about today. Motability scheme, Emmanuel Macron's visit, and indeed that the Epstein Files that apparently aren't the Epstein Files. We'll talk about that. But we've just seen the publication of the very first report, interim report into the horrific Horizon IT and Post Office scandal. And the public inquiry has found in the first volume of their report, the chairman, Sir Wyn Williams, concluded there was an enormous personal toll, not just with people being prosecuted, some serving prison terms, 900 people prosecuted wrongly, they believe, for supposedly stealing from the post office, but in fact it was the Horizon IT system developed by Fujitsu. At least 13 postmasters may have taken their own lives after being accused of wrongdoing. I think the figure originally was 4, bad enough on its own. A further 59 people told the inquiry they had seriously considered ending their lives, 10 of whom had tried on at least one occasion. Other postmasters and family members talked about suffering from mental health disorders, depression, alcoholism, family breakup, divorce, bankruptcy, suffering personal abuse. The chairman has said this is the worst scandal, a financial scandal in British institutions, and he insists that full and fair compensation is made because we have simply not seen that happening. Tom Slater, these are extraordinary figures.
No, absolutely. I mean, we knew it was bad, but when you're shown the human cost of this scandal that went on for so long, it really hammers home the point, doesn't it, of how poorly treated, how ignored their concerns were. The fact that you had Fujitsu and this terrible piece of software given to the post office, and yet even though complaints were made for many, many years, that even in previous iterations it wasn't working, they just refused to accept it. They were happy to destroy people's reputations, and we all know what happens when someone's reputation is destroyed. It can really lead them to a very dark place. So again, this is, as ever with these inquiries, it's often furnishing us with more horrific details, but just to a picture that we already basically knew. But it's just the case for proper accountability on this, which I understand will come in the next phase of this report and this inquiry, is really what is needed now. Well, indeed, and we know there's been massive issues trying to actually get those payouts, that compensation again, and what's been interimly offered, simply nothing close to the damage to people's lives that we've seen. We're speaking right now to the Shadow Housing Secretary, is now Levelling Up and Housing Secretary, Kevin Hollinrake, who joins us. Very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Good afternoon. You were under Rishi Sunak's premiership. You were the Post Office Minister. So, your reaction to this? Those are just the most extraordinary numbers that just sort of come into my view. 13 postmasters may have taken their own lives. 59 considered it. 10 who'd actually tried to commit suicide. Devastation on people's lives, but this call for urgent action to tackle what is one of the worst scandals in public life. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, terrible. And I can't say I was surprised, Julia. You know, I got involved in trying to help with the scandal from the backbenches in 2020. And you heard those cases, those horrendous situations people were in. And when your life is ruined, when your reputation is ruined in your local community, it's not surprising people might consider taking their own life, because
you've gone from being an upstanding member of the local community to people shouting at your kids on the way to school. I mean,
terrible.
Absolutely awful. Look, I know that you are one of the people and the ministers who has been, praised by those post office campaigners, long before it became sort of more publicly known by that ITV fictionalised documentary, that drama. And you're trying to take action. But has enough action been taken? Because again and again and again, we're told people could get compensation, but then people aren't getting compensation. People are still dying, having not had compensation for the terrible, terrible treatment they were handed out, and the massive financial, familial and losses and reputational losses they have suffered. Was it a mistake to basically put the post office, who are the cause of all this, in charge of dealing with those compensation claims?
Yes, it was a mistake, and I said so in 2020 when they did that, and also the solicitors involved in defending the post office in the legal action, Herbert Smith Freehills, were left in charge of that compensation scheme too. It was a horrendous mistake. We subsequently reversed that. We also overturned 700 convictions by statute. That's never been done before. We brought forward fixed sum awards so that people could just, without having to go through a complex assessment of their loss, they could just take that money off the table, which many people have done, which is why compensation has gone from a few tens of millions of pounds to over £1 billion. We also picked people like James Arbuthnot, Lord Arbuthnot, who featured with dramatisation of the series, in charge of the Compensation Advisory Board to make it truly independent and cross-party. Kevin Jones also was on that board. So we did many things to try and get this right. Could we have done more? Of course. There are some things I would like to have done that we didn't do at the time, but I've committed to work with Johnny Reynolds and Gareth Thomas, who are the ministers now in charge of that process, in any way I can, to assist in trying to make sure we accelerate compensation with the people who are still expecting it as well.
The trouble with this scandal, and it's been a horrific scandal, we also had, the blood scandal with haemophiliacs, given, blood that was infected with HIV and hepatitis. We've had numerous other scandals. And always the key thing is there is, something happens, people at some level realise something is going horribly wrong. And that is covered up. And the urge to protect the institution, whichever it is, the NHS or the post office, or whether it's private or public, there is always an urge to cover it up rather than to do the right thing, to speak up and say, something's going horribly wrong, we need to stop doing this and we need to tackle it. Why does that keep happening? Whether, again and again, in every area of life in this country, this is a serious systemic problem that we have, is it not, in our public life?
It keeps happening because we don't hold the people to account who are responsible for the cover-up. That's what happens. The reason I got involved in the post office is because I was campaigning on behalf of other people wronged by the banks, RBS, Lloyds HBOS, and the same thing had happened there. The people who were responsible for those outrages, those mistreatment, which also resulted in suicides, have got off scot-free. They've taken their bonuses and they've gone. Until somebody gets held to account for these scandals, and that's the other part of what needs to happen with the post office scandal. Compensation is one thing, putting people in jail is another.
Well, I was going to ask you what you mean by held to account, but that is what it means, isn't it? Not people getting fined, because that's a company, that's a business, not suing people, people going to prison and realising if they cover things up, that they are adding to the crime that has been committed.
That's right.
Okay.
I was told, so when I went into some of the media around that when I was post office minister, and I was told by certain people within the department, don't mention people going to jail. Straight away I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say people should go to jail because they should. And I think clearly we don't take responsibility for prosecutions. That's our police forces, it's the Crown Prosecution Service, but we've urged them to take forward this investigation and conclude those quickly and prosecute people, because that's what should happen. If anybody watched the inquiry, the in-depth inquiry that Sir Win Williams did, there were people who were clearly culpable in anybody's view in terms of that cover-up. They knew what was going on back in 2013 and even earlier, and they decided not to say anything for PR purposes, which is outrageous and has led to many people being destitute, their lives devastated. Is simply wrong. Somebody has to carry the can, and that should include criminal prosecution and a jail sentence.
OK, Kevin Hollerake, thank you for that. Well, look, we invited you on, first of all, really to talk about the trip to the UK, the state visit from Emmanuel Macron, along with his wife, Brigitte Macron. They arrived a little bit early. They have now arrived at Windsor Castle. They've been greeted by the King and the Queen. They are now making a sort of military procession going on. There's an awful lot of horses and cavalry guards and the like. The question we're asking really is, why on earth are we rolling out the red carpet for Emmanuel Macron, a man who has done everything he can to try and not just undermine but punish the British people for that democratic vote for Brexit, threatened to cut off the electricity to Channel Islands over a fishing dispute, has made demand after demand after demand, a punishment beating for those in Northern Ireland to try and make life as difficult for them, has failed despite being given £771 million of taxpayers' money to actually stop the boats leaving, the dinghies leaving Calais and coming to our shores. Why on earth are we rolling out the red carpet to him? Oh, by the way, a lame duck as well. Lost a parliamentary election and has only got less than 2 years in office. Why are we doing this?
Well, fair question. Clearly, France. I'm a great admirer of France, and some of the French people as well are very nice. I like going to the country and
so do
allies. There you go, allies and friends. That doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they do or say, and I agree with you. I mean, I think a number of people within the European Union deliberately made life difficult for us.
Oh, Kevin. Sorry, all right, Kevin.
Irresponsible, unfair, and actually detrimental to their own constituents.
Yeah, sorry, we lost you a little bit there, but I think we've got the gist of it. You say they're allies and friends, but it's been interesting, that question I put to Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss some years back during the leadership election, Emmanuel Macron, friend or foe. Rishi Sunak immediately said friend. Liz Truss said, the jury's out. But the jury is still out, isn't it? Oh, right, we've got you. I think we've got you. We're going to persevere.
Oh, sorry.
No,
so sorry.
It's just come back again. So is he a friend or foe?
Well, I think he can be both, can't he? At times, you're going to have differences of opinion with the other person on the other side of the negotiating table. So you shouldn't think everything they're going to do is in our interests. That doesn't mean we have to be disagreeable when we disagree. But our negotiations should be forceful. It should be in our interests. And I think it's fair to say we spent a fortune on that agreement with France for very little reward in terms of reduction in the numbers of people coming across the channel. I do think the only solution to this, having said that, is what we did have, which is the Rwanda plan. It needs a deterrent.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was only going to be a few hundred people. It wasn't going to work as a deterrent.
Not true. That's not true, Julie. You're not looking at the deterrent impact of that. That scheme could have been scaled to any size, but it wouldn't have needed to been because it's a deterrent. We know people would not want to come to the UK if that meant they'd actually end up in Rwanda.
If only a couple of hundred people out of the 20,000 who've arrived in the last 6 months were sent to Rwanda, I reckon they'd take those odds. They're probably better than the odds of surviving the Channel migrant crossing.
Yeah, they would take those odds, that's right, but that's not the purpose of the scheme. The purpose of the scheme could be scaled in such a way that every single person who arrives on our shores illegally would be deported.
If it was scaled, then they'd be similar to Australia, and then it would work. What do you make of this idea of this one in, one out scheme? Now, ostensibly, it sounds crazy. We're going to have the same number of people. The idea being that we get to return to France illegal migrants who've paid people smugglers to come on dinghies, but we take someone who is being vetted as an asylum seeker to come to our country. Now, do you think that could actually have a deterrent effect? So there's no point in the migrants paying the people smugglers, so we actually wouldn't end up taking so many people as we are currently taking illegally? Or are you concerned, as we are, that Keir Starmer is really bad at negotiating deals, so God knows what we'd end up paying the French for that, like we paid Mauritius for the Chagos Islands. But there's also an element where those legitimate asylum seekers, they would then be bringing their entire extended family with them, and we'd end up with even more people.
Well, it would have minimal effects. There's no question about it. So not the kind of solution we need. If you think about it, they're only going to take back what we take. So lots of people we take, the numbers are going to be greater. We're going to be taking a lot more people in than we're sending back. That's the reality with this. It just, all the stuff that Keir Starmer comes up with, it's never going to work. This smash the gangs, we all knew it was complete nonsense. We've been trying to do that in the drug trade for 50 years. It's just simple. It's just a distraction. It's not a solution. The only solution is a brave solution, which is the ultimate deterrent of sending those people to another country, and not that they come back if they pass their asylum claim, but if they pass that asylum claim, if they're granted asylum, they stay in the country, the third country.
Okay.
That's the deterrent we need. That's the one he scrapped.
Can I ask you just a couple of the stories just before we let you go? Resident doctors, used to be known as junior doctors, they have voted by 90% on a turnout of 55% for strike action over pay once again. Last time they were expecting 22%, got it from the Labour government soon after they came into power. And this time they're asking for a 29% pay rise to restore their pay levels, they say, back to the level they were at in 2010. What's your reaction to that news?
Well, I think this has come as a result of the deal that was struck last year. The Labour government came in, they settled the pay claim at face value without any strings attached. They were such easy negotiators to negotiate with. clearly Labour's backed by the unions. There's no question about that. So they have to dance to the unions' tune. The unions know exactly where they've got the Labour government. The Labour government basically the unions say jump and Labour says how high. So it was inevitable that people will come back to the negotiating table and ask for more, and the chickens are coming home to roost.
They are. We'll be paying for it if we do. Also, finally, the sad news this morning that Lord Tebbit, has died at the age of 94. Of course, famous for being the right-hand man of Margaret Thatcher all those years. Of course, sadly, he and his wife were both very much badly hurt in the IRA Brighton bombing in 1984. His wife paralysed for life by that attack. But also famous for saying that he about his father when he didn't riot, when he didn't have a job, he got on his bike and looked for work. How big a loss is he to the Conservative cause?
Massive. I mean, straightforward, one of the big beasts of politics that we remember. We look at the nostalgia about politics in yesteryear, don't we? We think about people like Norman Tebbit. And that's a message that was controversial at the time. I absolutely totally
I never
agree
thought
with
it was controversial.
No,
I was
exactly.
a Labour voter at the time. I thought it wasn't.
Some people didn't like it. But I totally agree with it. At the end of the day, the world does not owe you a living. I was told that at school, I was told that at home, and that's the kind of Norman Tebbit message, and I completely agree with it. He'll be sadly missed. A great support and a great contributor to our party.
Kevin Hollyrake, really appreciate you joining. He's covered a lot of ground there. Shadow Housing Secretary now, former Post Office Minister under Rishi Sunak, commenting on that Post Office report. Absolutely tragic. 13 postmasters believed to have taken their lives as a result of the scandal. And another 59 considered it and 10 attempted suicide. That is just the scale of the worst impact of that Post Office scandal on people's lives. 12:19 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about the Epstein Files and all the conspiracy theories. Well, apparently there is nothing to see here. That is what we were told yesterday. But is that true? We'll talk to Freddie Gray, US editor of The Spectator, about that up next. This is Talk.
Well, Bridget Phillipson was asked a direct question yesterday and refused to give a direct answer. So it seems that the DfE may have moved that on a little bit yesterday. If she just said yesterday, we're not going to take these away from children who've got them, then everyone would know where they stood. You wouldn't have had front pages warning of revolts from Labour MPs again. Maybe that's what's got them worried and rushed out the statement, but it's not really a good way to govern, particularly when we're talking about vulnerable children and their families who often have to battle a lot to get these plans in place.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:21 is the time. Let's talk about the Epstein Files. Well, you know what? We've heard an awful lot about them. Donald Trump, one of the things he always promised before he was elected this time around was he would publish the Jeffrey Epstein Files. We would find out who was on the list, what really happened to him. Did he commit suicide? Was he murdered? Because of all the names of very, very powerful men that he had in his little black book, who'd perhaps gone to on his Lolita Express plane to basically, well, let's face it, abuse young underage girls who had been trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. Well, according to the latest report, no, none of this is actually an issue. There is no conspiracy. Nothing to see here. Well, let's talk about this with Freddie Gray. He's the US editor of The Spectator and joins us. Good afternoon to you, Freddie.
Hello, Julia. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for joining us. Now, just tell us what the developments have been in the last few days. What's actually happened?
Well, rather mysteriously, after spending years really talking up the Epstein's files and this client list, this list of famous, rich, powerful people that Jeffrey Epstein knew, hung out with, partied with, and the theory had always been that he may have compromat or compromising evidence against them. The Trump administration on Sunday night, the FBI and the Department of Justice released a statement saying there is no client list and that there's no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. That the evidence suggests that he killed himself is what they said. And that he seems to have conducted all his predation, all his terrible sex crimes on his own, yes. Albeit with the help of Ghislaine Maxwell, who's already in jail. This is a very odd development for a lot of Trump supporters, because in America, the Epstein story has become this sort of neuralgic story for Trump supporters, that this isn't exactly what you get with the elite. You get these terrible crimes covered up by a very, very rich and powerful, nefarious groups. And of course, there's a lot of madness that goes along with that conspiracy theorizing, and a lot of it is nonsense.
Well, there's a lot of conspiracy there, but there's also a lot of truth. You know, you think about Harvey Weinstein, that was all covered up. But, you know, Sean Combs, you know, he may have escaped some of the charges, but, you know, his behaviour covered up by Star. You know, Clinton and his interns covered up. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff that is covered up at the high level.
There is an awful lot of stuff. You're absolutely right. And what's particularly strange, you know, the Trump administration now, they're hoist by their own conspiracy theory petard, because they have promised openness and transparency, and what they're giving us is not openness and transparency.
Yeah, well, especially that contrast, isn't there, between what was it the Attorney General Pam Bondi had said, that, you know, she's got the I've got the Epstein client list sitting on my desk right now, and as you pointed out in a piece for the Mail today, well, you know, well, then she says it doesn't exist. We know there was a little black book. We've seen pictures with some of the numbers blacked out of, you know, the number of telephone numbers that he had for, you know, Prince Andrew, for instance, who Ghislaine Maxwell had introduced him to, who, interestingly, by the way, is now free to end his travel ban after the FBI has closed its probe into his links with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. But I've read some interesting theories about how, you know, the compromat was not what Jeffrey Epstein did. It wasn't about, right, I've had you on my lead to express, I've seen you sexually abuse a 15-year-old girl, which I procured for you, and now I've got that on you. I can blackmail you, or I can get information from you, whatever. But actually, it was more about him being able to get close to a lot of men and feeding information back to security services in America, because he was clearly helped by someone in authority when he was being accused of crimes, because again and again and again, the police would not investigate. We know that. And even when he did get done, a deal was done, and he was done for a tiny, like 1% of the crimes that we know he was committing against these girls.
Well, that's exactly it. And that would be the obvious figure of suspicion, obvious body of suspicion would point towards security services, either America's security service or another foreign government security service, that were using him in some way, and that was part of the reason he was able to get away with it for so long. But there's just so much we don't know. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell is a fascinating figure in this story. Yeah. She's in jail in Florida at the moment. She's moved to a lower security prison in Florida, but we haven't heard from her. And actually, I'm going to interview her brother, Ian Maxwell, later, who's been campaigning for her release and saying that actually she's been, accused. She's been punished for all the crimes that her partner did. But what's so difficult about this for Donald Trump is that everybody thinks that because he knew Epstein, the reason that this is not coming out is because he's on the list.
Well, we know
Elon Musk, of course.
Yes, we've got pictures of them together. We know Bill Clinton, Bill Gates has admitted travelling on the plane. Now we know. I mean, Melinda Gates, his ex, has said one of the reasons she divorced him was because of his friendship with Jeffrey. Everyone was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the guy who paid for everything, the billionaire. He had the biggest, most expensive house in New York. He had an island and a private jet, and he was very generous. Everybody was friends with him. But the question is, how much people knew. But we've seen interviews with people who went into the house, which Prince Andrew stayed at. When he went to break off his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted of trafficking underage girls for prostitution, for goodness sake. But he, as has happened to all of our friends, has it not? That's how we would break it off. But you would walk into this house and it would be full of very, very young teenage girls. A single man with no child of his own, certainly not a teenage daughter, and the place is full of teenage girls. I mean, red flag, everyone, red flag.
Well, red flags all over the place. And we're supposed to believe now, according to the latest statement from the FBI, that Epstein was simultaneously running a very serious paedophile operation involving over 1,000 victims, they say, at the same time as he was running endless parties for the rich and famous. And that we're supposed to believe these two worlds never crossed over.
Yeah.
That defies belief.
And especially as these girls were openly in many of his homes and were flying on his plane with him. Well, there's also, just finally, there's also the issue of how he died. Now, I have to say, this man is behind bars. His best way of getting out of prison this time, now they're taking it seriously, he's probably not going to be able to do a deal like he did previously many years ago and kept all his big mates, is basically to name names and threaten to name names so he can get a deal. Suddenly, he commits suicide. The CCTV over his prison cell, which is supposed to be there, the cameras, there's no footage from this period of time. I mean, when he was supposed to be on suicide watch. I've got big question marks about this. This report says no problem. He definitely wasn't murdered. He definitely committed suicide.
Well, and indeed, and the Department of Justice yesterday released a video, which they say is enhanced and raw. I think they've only released the enhanced footage, is what I've seen. And it's one of the most boring videos you'll ever watch. It's sort of 8 hours of outside his cell. And you see someone moving a bin, and then you see something else happen, and one of them opens a door next door. But essentially nothing happens outside Epstein's cell. But this flies in the face of what we previously learned and what other federal prosecutors had claimed, which is that the footage had gone missing. And
the guards happened to be away from their posts when it happened, yes.
The best case scenario is one of the greatest security cock-ups of all time, because this very high profile prisoner was just ignored for a very long period of time, days after he tried to kill himself already. So he's supposed to be under strict supervision, and he wasn't. There are so many questions thrown up, and the Trump administration has just stonewalled it, which is exactly what they weren't supposed to do.
Yeah, it's not looking good. As you said, Elon Musk, he said the reason why he's not publishing it is because he's one of the names on the list. That was what his claim was. Freddie Gray, fascinated to talk to you, US editor of Spectator. Thank you for that. Tom Slater is still with me, editor of Spiked Online. Now, Tom, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I'm cock-up theory all the way, nearly always is the case. There is no doubt at all Jeffrey Epstein was, where you are very well connected and very, very, very rich, and you've been able to get off basically pretty much scot-free. I mean, even when he was in an open prison for trafficking underage girl prostitution, he was flying around on his plane, for goodness sake. The guards were going with him to the prison. I mean, it was absurd. This is a man who knows how to operate. This was a man who could pretty much buy anybody, who had influence. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to say that he could have caused an awful lot of trouble for a lot of very, very important men, and that there would be a lot of people who would prefer that he was dead.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think that's one thing about the kind of conspiratorial climate we live in now, is that it sometimes leads to people to claim much grander conspiracies rather than the simple ones that we know go on every day, because there are people with money, there are people with influence. That means that they can get themselves even out of the most horrific charges that are levelled against them. This is something which, without wanting to sound cynical, is just the stuff of everyday life at the level of the elites. And it's one of those things where, as far as Trump is concerned, it does feel like, because they know that there's this element within their base which is really into this stuff. Some of it to a understandable degree, some of it because they've really gone off the deep end.
Well, it ties in with that whole, the Democrats. It's the mad sort of, QAnon stuff about Hillary Clinton.
Paedophiles run the world, all that kind of stuff, and it kind of keys into that for some of them. But the issue is that it's you indulge it to a certain extent, but not enough. Suddenly you're going to be consumed by it too, and this is another example of that, I guess, of like, how do you contain all these competing elements with the Trump base and keep all of them?
But my thing is, like, they say, again, that Jeffrey Epstein had attempted suicide. Again, how do we know that? I mean, people get hurt in prison, even when solitary confinement. We know that, but and again, there's a lot of people with a lot of money and a lot of power who would have happily had him not be there. But the reality is, I don't accept that somebody who's beat these cases before, who, even if he's been told you haven't got a chance, I think after a trial, when he was convicted, then, oh, that's it, I'm done. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life like this. I'm going to kill myself. I think a man of that power, of that experience, with that many contacts, with that much money, would not have taken his own life. In the same way, you look at the Harvey Weinstein, who still is like fighting every single case. These are, you know, evil, awful men who believe they are the masters of the universe. They don't take their life when they still think they've got a chance of beating things. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to lose my reputation. You'd already been convicted for trafficking underage girls.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's so much about this story that doesn't really add up, which is why it invites so much, you know, speculation, understandable speculation on one side, through to the full-blown theory of everything that you get in certain corners of the internet. And I think at the very least, you know, even the fact that, even if we take the facts as read, that there was this suicide attempt, and yet he was left alone for such a long period of time. Even that raises questions.
And also, just someone so high profile, you know they're going to be extra careful. That's the reality. What do you make of Prince Andrew? He used to be known as Air Miles Andy. He's going to end his self-imposed travel ban. He's returning to being Air Miles Andy. A leaked memo revealed, obviously, this FBI, that they're closing their investigation into his links with Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, you know, I don't know about you, I've always paid 10 million quid to keep someone quiet who I've never met. And we saw, of course, the tragic death of Virginia Giuffre. I mean, sort of everyone involved, either behind bars or dead now, it would appear, apart from, of course, his security personnel, who presumably would have known where Prince Andrew was and what he was doing a lot of that time. I still would like to hear from them. But at the end of the day, if you don't cooperate with the FBI, it's not going to have a statement. But basically, he was very nervous about flying abroad at all, because he didn't know if he was going to face a civil action or if he would be arrested and sent to the States. It had always been a diplomatic incident. I think he was basically told, yeah, you know what, you're going to have to stay here. You're going to stay in Windsor, keep quiet. You can turn up to the odd family Christmas, but otherwise keep out of the way. Now he's free to fly because he's not going to face possible criminal action.
And I'm sure he will be, you know, straight down the airport as soon as possible. I mean, the thing is, if Prince Andrew recognised the kind of gravity of what was taking place, and again, you don't have to believe all the claims that are made against him to realise that he handled this absolutely terribly. Anyone else would think, I'm going to live the quiet life. I will be held up on one of the royal properties somewhere, you know, the occasional trip into Woking for a Pizza Express, and leave it at that. But that's not him. He's going to come out swinging and probably want to relive some of the glory.
He did absolutely nothing wrong, and he also can't sweat. And he loves the Pizza Express. Believe every single word he says. Of course we do. That's why he paid a woman he'd never met 10 million quid.
Happens all the time.
I mean, who hasn't done that? Come on. Right, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to get to your calls. Just a reminder also, of course, about that breaking news about the BMA and the strike by resident doctors. They voted by 90% to vote for strike action in the coming year. And, of course, that extraordinary report into the post office scandal, the first interim report showing that 13 postmasters at least may have taken their own lives as a result of what happened to them. And many others consider taking their lives, 10 even attempting. That is the human tragedy behind this awful scandal. More on all that coming up. Plus, we're going to be talking about the Motability scheme with the Taxpayers Alliance. Why are people with tennis elbow getting a free car? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:37 is the time. Let's get back to your calls about Emmanuel Macron. Yeah, that state visit by Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte Macron to the UK has begun. 3 days. We've got a big banquet in Windsor Castle tonight. We've seen the greeting by the Prince and Princess of Wales, and now the King and Queen in Windsor. And there's going to be an address to Parliament at about 4 o'clock today by Emmanuel Macron. But why are we rolling the red carpet out to him? A man who has done nothing to stem the flow of Channel migrants, done nothing but try to punish the British people, not the British government, the British people, for a democratic vote for Brexit. Is he friend or foe? I would say he's very much foe. Or he's just another lame duck, just like Keir Starmer. But this one has only got 2 years left to go. And what do you think of his one-in, one-out Channel migrant deal? That is what Keir Starmer and President Macron have been discussing. Starmer hoping to get that over the line. But is that in our interest? Well, let's talk about that with Dave, who is in Hemel Hempstead. Very, very good afternoon to you, Dave. What do you want to say?
Hello, Julia.
Hello
lovely
there.
programme and lovely station. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, we're great to have you as a listener or reviewer. Thank you for that. What do you want to say?
I don't stop listening. My wife says, "Why do you get so wound up, Dave?" I said, "Because I've got 6 grandchildren, and now I'm worried about their future."
Thank
That's what
you.
I'm worried about.
I keep talking to people who say, "Oh, you know what? I don't have to worry about it. I'm done with this all." You've got kids or grandkids. You need to care about the state of this country.
Yeah, I'm 71. So anyway, what I'd like to say is, what no one's pointing out is, every one of these boats has to be transported to the estuary where they're launched in a van, the size of a transit. Inside that transit van has got to be the boat folded up.
Yeah.
It's going to take 3 to 4 blokes to handle that and blow it up.
Yeah.
They're going to need a petrol-driven compressor to blow it up. Then they're going to attach a motor to it. That's all going to take over an hour to do.
Yeah.
I've owned boats. And it worries me why the French police are not looking out for these
Well,
vans.
like drones. I mean, drones. Really, really simple.
Confiscate the vans, and it'll stop it within a couple of weeks, I believe.
Well, the thing is, you could stop it. I've always thought, at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do with the gangs or the boats that is going to make a massive dent. You can make it harder for them, make it more expensive, confiscate the boats, knife the boat, all of that, and arrest those people. Someone else will turn up. There is so much money. The only way to really stop it is to stop people wanting to get on those boats. And that is, when they get here, they get turned straight around and they're gone.
But if there's no boats, they won't come. They'll have to turn around and go somewhere else.
I mean, certainly Belgium managed to manage this. Apparently, they've had a different policy. It does seem to me to be not beyond the wit of man to stop people in sand dunes getting on a boat. I mean, I have to say, like, you can't see these people.
Yeah, I mean, when they slash the boats, they only do it when there's the cameras there to film it. You know, that's all put on for the cameras. You can tell.
Yeah,
they've got no protective clothing on whatsoever. They're standing there in T-shirts with a knife. Here, look at us. And that's what they do.
Yeah, but then the rest of the time they're not. I mean, again, 20,000 people didn't swim here, did they, this year?
No. And if you come here illegally, you've got no documents, no passport, nothing, send them straight back to France. You're an illegal. We don't want you. We don't know who you are.
France won't take them. We're not allowed to go into their waters.
You know, I tried to get insurance yesterday for a motorcycle I own. I had to give all my identification, my driving licence number. Did I use my own credit card for money laundering?
Yeah.
There's all these checks made on me, an honest citizen who pays his tax in this country. You know what I mean? I've paid tax all my life in this country.
Yeah.
This month I've got to pay another £5,000 in tax. And I just think to myself, what am I doing? I've got a business. I've got a VAT, PAYE, corporation tax. You know, it just goes on and on and on. You think, what am I doing?
Well, I'll tell you what we could do. At the end of this state banquet at Windsor Castle, we handed Emmanuel Macron that bill, the 771 million quid that we spent on them not stopping the migrant boats. Should we give him the bill for that?
I don't think Starmer, he didn't got it in his mind. He's a weak guy. He's not strong. He's not a strong guy. We need another person similar to Maggie in power.
That's what you want.
This guy is ruining the country, and this party is ruining the country.
Dave, you're sounding very down, very down. I can understand. But look, at least we've got blue skies back again. Dave in Hemel Hempstead, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Michelle. She's in London. Hello, Michelle. What do you want to talk about?
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
Great show.
Thank you.
Well, the only thing I would have welcomed Macroning would be a whole truck of manure. I'm telling you.
I mean, that's one kind of hospitality, I guess.
No. And Julia, all this about all these people coming over in the boats, why isn't anybody standing up in Parliament telling us why these have got rights over the British people? If they're just all two-faced, they're all cowards and they're liars.
Well, hold on a minute. What about the Reform MPs, some Tory MPs been standing up and saying that this is... They haven't got rights of the British people. We've just said, for some reason, they've got pretty much the same rights as British people. That's the bit I don't get.
I don't get any of it. I mean, the only thing Starmer's doing, smash the gangs, he's smashing the United Kingdom.
There is that. I mean, everyone's a bit miserable today, I have to say. Would you have rolled the... you say you wouldn't have rolled the red carpet out for Macron, but what do you make of this one-in, one-out deal?
I don't believe it. I don't care. I think all out. I've never heard such... I don't know if they're... whatever they're drinking, because it's something... Their mind is going. And, Julia, getting back to this with these Deliveroo fellas, I haven't had a takeaway in 6 years. Do you know why?
Why?
Because the tap water is absolutely dangerous, the British water.
Wait a minute, what's that got to do with takeaway? Oh, because the food is cooking. British tap water's not dangerous.
No, it is, Julia. Go on Amazon and you can get a test. You would be shocked what is in our water. I was not well. I kept going to the doctors. I had it filtered. I did it warm. And then when it found out, it was the water. So I drink bottled waters now, and
She's so fancy. Okay, that's you reckon there's something wrong in the water? I mean, might have been affecting you. I don't know. I don't have a problem with my water in London, but I have to say where I am. Michelle, thank you. Appreciate your call there. Let me just come back to you. Not on the quality of our water, Tom Slater.
I do have views, but
yeah. The truck of manure to agree, Emmanuel Macron. There is an abject lack of trust that anything will be done over the panel migrants issue. Do you think people think that even the Nigel Farage, if he did get elected, as the polls are suggesting that he could do that? Because I think one of our callers earlier said, I don't even think that Nigel Farage is going to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a real danger for reform. They've got to come in with a really credible plan.
It's got to work quickly.
It's got to work quickly. It's got to show its workings. It's got to be something which is not just shock and awe, but actually a clear roadmap to dealing with this. Because otherwise, I think we could see faith in politics crumble even more than it already has.
Yeah.
We've had that in recent years with people voting for a change, not getting it, in fact, getting the opposite. So there is a lot riding on Reform's shoulders, I think, that they can take these issues seriously, that they've got something credible to push it through, and that it's not just going to become another point for people to become cynical about the political system, because the cost of that could be quite serious.
Absolutely. 12:45 is the time. More from Ted from Tom coming up. I'm also going to be talking about the Motability scheme with the Taxpayers Alliance's William Yarwood. £600 million a year cost of those cars for people on various different benefits. But why are people who've got constipation and tennis elbow, whatever the heck that is, getting free cars on the state? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
also the overly monitoring and legalizing the relationships between people in the workplace because of things that people say. And they will say, Angela Rayner and this government, well, it's not really about free speech, it's explicitly about harassment. But of course, when you start saying a woman is a woman, or you believe in other things and you say those things, people then say, well, words are violence and that's distressing and harmful and that's harassment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:48 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's turn our attention now to the Motability scheme. Now, we had a lot of talk about benefits, disability benefits, PIP, those personal independence payments, and a lot of people claiming these. I mean, just huge explosion in the number of people claiming these in recent years, many for mental health problems. But it's now emerged that we've got extraordinary amounts of people who are able to claim their Motability cars. Some 32,000 new cars handed over for people suffering from anxiety and other depressive disorders in recent years. 800 going to people living with obesity. You'd have thought they'd be better off walking, wouldn't you? It might be good for them. Extraordinarily, people with tennis elbow and even constipation getting these free cars. Why? Let's talk about this with William Yarwood. He's from the Taxpayers Alliance and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, William.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, can you just break down and explain to us how this scheme works? Because I've been reading something like 1 in 6 cars or something on the British roads now is a Motability car. A number of people are claiming them. How many of them are there, and how do people get them, and how much does it cost us, and how much does it cost them?
Sure. Well, actually, I think it's about a third of the used car market at the moment are ex-Motability cars, Julia. So it's actually grown quite significantly. So, yeah, so as we know, there's PIP and then there's the enhanced rate of PIP as well. But in the enhanced rate of PIP, there's a mobility component, basically how on earth you can get on with your daily life. Do you need help moving and so on and so forth? And people can trade in that top rate of enhanced PIP for a Motability car.
Right, and that top rate is roughly around the 12 grand mark a year,
yeah, roughly around there, Julia, and this allows them to get onto the Motability scheme, which allows them to choose from a variety of cars, some very old bangers and low down cars, but also some quite nice cars as well. And of course, these cars are road tax exempt, they're insurance exempt, and you get a new one every 2 years. So if you can get onto this gig,
oh, is it? So you can just get a new car. I mean, I don't even own a new car, and I pay my own way. But I can understand. So if you've got that 12 grand, you can put that towards a car that could cover the cost of a car, or you could put it towards a new car. You pay the extra, you pay the difference?
Yeah, you can pay. Yeah, people do pay the difference, but often it's taxpayers paying the difference. If I'm honest with you.
Oh, really?
Sometimes it is. Yeah.
So someone's getting a BMW, but they'll say, "But I need." Why would we say you can have a more expensive car when you could easily buy a car for 12 grand that was second hand or third hand?
Yeah, and I think that's the core question, really. I think the Motability scheme started off relatively uncontroversially. For the last 40, 50 years, it's never been in the public spotlight because it wasn't abused in the way that it's been ever since COVID, Julia, because people have started to realise, after their exposure to the welfare state since COVID, what they can actually get. And as you said earlier, there are people who are obese, who are alcoholics, who have drug misuse, who get the enhanced rate of PIP and are able to get cars like this. I mean, you said you can't afford a car. I can't afford a car either, Julia.
I can afford a car. I don't understand why you'd want a new car when you can do literally a minute after you drive it off the forecourt. It's lost like a third of its value or something. I think it's insane. Unless people are hiring a car. Also, I barely drive. I mean, our car's got cobwebs most of the time. But that's because I'm lucky. I live in central London. But most people, they do need a car. And again, a lot of us would say, well, yeah, people who are, severely disabled, physically disabled, or physically disabled child, that we'd want them to, if they're on low income, to be able to get around, get to hospital appointments, maybe be able to get to and from work. I mean, PIP is supposed to be about encouraging people to work and making it easier for them. So again, most people, good moral people, would think this was a good thing. But basically, this has been expanded out of all reality to people. Again, I don't know why, if you've got constipation or even if you've got depression, why you should be entitled to get a car. But also the fact that it's not just you that gets to use it. So it's your friends and relatives too. You can nominate various people to use it. So they get the car, presumably also the disabled badge. They get to park right close to the, to the entrance to the supermarket or the cinema. There's a lot of benefits to this.
Yeah, of course there is, and actually we found at the Taxpayers Alliance that actually one of the big drivers behind people getting the enhanced rate of PIP and therefore onto the Motability scheme are things like ADHD and anxiety. I'm not quite sure if you're anxious you should get a taxpayer subsidised car from the state. I mean, that may... But because
I actively don't want you to be driving. I mean, alcoholism, drug use... ADHD, depression. I really would prefer you weren't behind the wheel of a car.
Yeah, quite. And I think the core problem with us, Julie, you ask about how this has exploded, and it's since COVID, because there's been a key thing that's happened both inside the DWP and to do with PIP and universal credit and enhanced rate of PIP, is in-person assessments have completely collapsed. So before COVID, Julia, about 80 to 85% of people were assessed in person. That's a decent chunk of the population, right, who are using that system. Yeah. Post-COVID, Julia, it's between 2 and 4%.
Oh, wow, because everyone's working from home. And have there been incentives? We've seen with the PIP, the personal independence payments, that there's actually been an incentivisation for staff to basically, there are keywords people can say, and they know how to play the system, and there are TikTok videos telling you what to say. Mention the word suicidal, bang, you're up there, enhanced, you're eligible for all this stuff. But there's also incentives in the system to encourage people who are doing the assessments to basically go, yeah, and then they're signing everyone on.
Yeah, indeed, and that's just part of the overall problem. If you've got a system like you've just described that incentivises this kind of thing, how on earth are we going to ever reduce the ballooning size of our welfare bill?
Well, we're not.
Farce.
I mean,
yeah,
we're
exactly.
not. We know that now. The government has basically said they're not. But how much has it exploded? We were told it's like 600 million quid now. But I mean, we're told this is, tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of cars. Those numbers don't quite add up to me. Is it not costing far more than that?
So if that's the statistics we know, Julia, but as you know, there are three kind of lies. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So that could be even worse. And also these statistics are just, I don't think they're from the last year. I think they're maybe from a year or two ago.
And it's expanding all the time.
Indeed.
Okay, so what would you reckon at Taxpayers' Alliance, because you've been finding out an awful lot of how these things are. And again, a lot of people aren't upset about a project because they think, people who need a car, they need a car. And then we'll go, well, hold on a minute, you don't need a car, so why are you getting a car? And particularly, again, if you're obese, I'm sorry, we're not giving you a car. Walk, even walking to the bus stop is going to be good for you. But how do we solve this?
I think the first point, as I mentioned earlier, is you need to get these assessments back in person. Like, you cannot assess whether anyone's properly mobile over a Zoom call, Julia. I mean, we're having a Zoom call right now. Could you assess if I was properly mobile with mine? Exactly. You'd have no idea, right? But if I said a few trigger words at you, if you're a DWP assessor, you might go, as you said earlier, tick, tick, tick. Oh, there we are. Onto the Motability scheme you go. Yeah. So I think that's one thing that needs to be done quite quickly, actually, and that's one thing the government can change right now. But also, just overall, the benefits and welfare system just needs to be clamped down on in terms of eligibility, like anxiety, mental health issues, all things that are real, by the way. I'm not dismissing people who have those issues, but there is a medicalisation of the ups and downs in life that we have in this country now, which is costing taxpayers billions upon billions of pounds. And as we saw last week, Julia, Labour aren't particularly interested in solving this, are they?
They definitely are not. My dad said it all ballooned under the Tories, and again, it's still allowed to happen, and they didn't get on top of it. A plague on all their houses, I think a lot of us say.
Plague on all the houses.
William Yarwood, really good to talk to you from the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you very much. They're doing God's work at the Taxpayers Alliance. They really are. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, said, now, I think you and I both come from a perspective, of course, if people need it, we talk about this with the welfare benefits, personal independent payments, they're but for the grace of God, if you haven't got a mental health disorder that completely incapacitates you or a physical disability, we want to make sure we're helping other people. That's what our taxes should be used for. But this is clearly an abuse of the system.
And everyone knows it as well. It's an expansion of the system to cover basically perfectly healthy people who, for whatever reason, have ended up in this particular trap. And I think there's a really strong case that what you want to do is make sure the criteria are right, make sure that people who can work are being given that funnel into work, so that the people who are very severely disabled, who really can't work more than a few days a week or at all, can be given what they need to live as autonomous life as possible.
Exactly, and aren't struggling, because we know that so many people who are genuinely disabled, and they're often their carers, because they're so disabled that they need their partner to give up work. And we've had callers who've regularly told us about that they really struggle, and that's just wrong in a moral society.
And the system should be far more generous to them.
Exactly.
But the prerequisite for that is making sure that people who've got repetitive strain injury or whatever.
Don't get it. Or constipation. I just don't.
Doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. It really doesn't. Tom said, thank you so much. We've covered an awful lot of ground today. Ian Collins is back today. He's been off, presumably. You spent the whole day filling out your Motability personal independence plan.
I did. I've got a Ford Fiesta coming on Monday.
Lovely, jubbly.
Can't wait for it. It's an absolute beauty.
What is your particular mental health condition you've claimed?
Well, you mentioned constipation. It's not that, by the way. But actually, I'm quite glad those people are not. I'm glad they're not in the workplace, you know, because you never know when that thing's over. So there's a problem there. But yes, the Ford Fiesta.
But it is laughable, this, isn't it? There are so many other heavier stories. But I know this is a very serious story, but it's just extraordinary.
Well, I agree with Tom, and I've said this forever. You know, I feel proud to live in a country where we help the most. In fact, I want to give those people a greater assistance than currently. Exactly. That's a given. You know?
So much happening today. We've got the Macron straight visit.
The Macron.
And Brigitte, I think, has a new wig.
Has he? No, she.
No, you know, her hair's often very. I mean, I know I'm helmet hair here, but you know. She has a very big. She has a lot of hair normally. It's gone much smaller. But anyway, Macron's over here state visit, rolling out the red carpet. Meanwhile, we've got this. We've got the doctors going on strike.
Yep.
And then we've got this extraordinary report from the Post Office inquiry showing about the number of people who've considered or even taken their own lives as a result of that scandal.
Absolutely.
So much going on. Everything in this country is going to pot.
Yeah, it's completely broken. I saw, oddly, somebody I wouldn't normally look to, Alexis Sale, the comedian. Now, about as left-wing as you can get. I saw an interview he did. I think it was with Mark Steele, the comedian, equally as left.
Usual suspects.
But he made the point, you know, he's a lefty and that's great. He's kind of the Corbyn, probably to the left of Corbyn. But he made the point that the right